다 가생에만 제외이나 딘시 미달라수 주루 고라 쉐체브로 다 다른 딜라 시제 마부치 페샤 나르 낭취라 로존 체마뉴버티르게 유엔메나.
So yesterday I said I would speak about the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths, but upon looking around it seems there are many foreign students here, and perhaps some of you have already studied a bit of the Dhamma, perhaps not.
낭취자니 자마뉴가 야나 가수리 종류유네야 디장기 메시지 도난 슈진부게 말레바 딘데 기유네면 가수유나.
So how many among you have studied a bit of Buddhism before? Perhaps how many of you have perhaps wanted to study a bit but didn't have like a strong interest for it? So let's just give a show of hands. How many of you have studied a bit already? So loved this Jangsare.
아니 장차발.
Jangsare.
네. 자니 장마는 기유나.
How many of you have not studied at all yet any Buddhism? If you raise your hands.
아니 니뉴리시오. 다 죄민도다. 뇌런딘데 쉬나. 다 상제 중딘 대지 취디 조가리 송교월 당가술라 가리 랑된 남기요레스. 디치고 인지미지 디치고 들어. 단 나랑소가 가리 고교, 단 나소가 가리 타투바, 타투는 나소가 가리 고교. 상제 중인데 취기 가리 송교, 다 도도 조지어이나 가리 송교. 단 나소가 강에 치슈디 가리 시디 도나시고.
And so it's no problem. So what we'd look at first is what did the Buddha actually teach? Which path did the Buddha show? Thinking about ourselves, what do we need to, ultimately, what do we want? What do we need to achieve? And what's the main thing we need to do to bring that about? And what's our main problem? What's our main problem at the moment? These are the things we want to look at first.
송이바 맞으러 강에 치슈디 가르송.
Dalai Lama.
다 도시디강라 다 소다 덴바 탄지에다 센다 덴바 탄지 소자 유두주 디온데와도 동해민데와 딜라다 주진시에고요 말이 지시 마부지하고에게요 말이 띵가랑소 냥뇽 차리고 말아서 상매 냥수뇨네 말아서 뇨에 수카자인 거로 다디 가서 시제기네 다들 막 상매 지주래 다디 미용주 지주래 민장도 마습이 뒤루이나 지주래다.
So what we can see from the start is that any living being and any sentient being that has a mind all want happiness and no one wants the slightest problem or suffering, right? We all know that from our own experience. We don't need to give any reasons for that, don't need to explain it. We all know that from our own experience. We all want happiness, not to suffer. All humans are the same like that. All animals are the same like that. All wanting happiness and not wanting suffering, right?
다 상제 중된 대지 러시아 야친부 랑가 야친부치 야친부스 징그러. 예, 서프라이즈 야친부치. 모스르 신부스너리다. 민다오지 송구도. 다 지제나 넘버 순디 나로로 유긴수 딩뒤지 로종 같이 체면 예미시다. 지제는 야부치에지. 지제는 야부치에지 말해. 미시 담다 유지. 다 딩뒤기 로종 시부 제유긴수 센나로라. 다 딩뒤기 로종 배 타신부 장바이 신연배 가수고래다. 체 투시디 장바이 상상. 딩딩 딩데 용추고래. 상 딩데 코추고래. 고도.
덴델기 로좀.
딩뒤 모든.
덴듀 알레.
마구는 가서 튀어튀야. 마고이나. 구다마트는 비싸겠다. kinso. 딩뒤기 로중. 딩뒤지 로중 배시부드는 체네. 다 로중 탈신바이. 다 로중 체 투슈디 라유에 상상 세나. 로다 잠블린디 나로기 로중 체 투슈디 라유에 상상지. 아니 디네 상제 중된데기 숭 디수제디 디무다 해소지 에 간라고 지유나 간래라고 지유나서 딘데 디무다서 순르지 임베 딘데기 나와 코시버레스 다디 상딘딘 땅고에 자고 그랬어.
And so what the Buddha taught was something really vast and really amazing, incredible. But perhaps for many of us, Rinpoche's not sure which of us have a good education or not, but probably many of us have a good modern education, and we might think that some of us might think we might have the best of the modern education, be really learned in that, and we think that that's like the highest thing you can get an education about, and then we might look at the Buddha's teachings and as more like entertainment or like watching a movie or something, just having a bit of interest in it, taking it that way.
얘기 마고는 송로지야. 얘기는 관계 바유기계 휴진 뭐 용거다. 아니 다 가볼래. 세상 다 대인장 다 저진부디 세상 나랑소라 나랑수 뇌바 타토바디 가르제 민뇌바 타토바디 가르제 강에 치슈디 가르제 세디 저디 당국요래 디 당용디 간라 시제기 만주내당디 다이공도学디 세부차송 저 소자 탕지 대원대바도 동해면 되고 지주인 거지 봐 디토라 맞춘 뒤주디 대원 차다 디지디 차 다 맞춘 뒤제 타토바디 뒤주 타토바디 디로와 민대바디야 동해 차디고 맞춘 민대바 타토바디 강에레 동해레 디 맞춘 민대바 타토바디 다 원나 상지정린데 주치기 가르송교래스 로 디 디어디 계진물이스 다그 쉬인바.
So the big question for us is, what is our highest wish, our strongest wish? And what's our biggest problem? Yeah, what's our biggest problem? And so remembering that we said like all living beings, whoever they are, just like us, all the same in wanting happiness and not wanting any problems or suffering. So our highest or ultimate aim or wish is to be happy. And our highest problem or biggest problem is our suffering. Right? So then we have to look at, well, what did the Buddha teach? What did the Buddha explain in relation to this?
다 아주 딱 가르쳐 그래다. 단대 봐도 미 로차네 단대 봐도 아주 강에 쓰야다 동에 쓰야기 더시 제버로 더시 제버로 다 더시 제버레디 다 강에 기지카시 동에 기지카시지 아주 다 동네 지유월 다죠 디 제도교 배선다고 차춘 뭐 있나 가서 민주기 탐망도 수가 디수제디 다 야르침이 수지로 민주제야 체지면 민주 제디 시제기 미기 강에 줘로 뇌기 나자기 강에다 안다나 신기 생기 강에다 디수제디 랑자 데데도다 랑자 데데 세상 디인상 간수 단대 봐도 동에 참만 매버 수액이 터시 간수 다 제투유의 상지지니 제버레디 간수기 루동타망부 치자망부 몽타망부 지제는 사야망부 진라 아주 터시 제버레디 간수 터시 디기 나랑수기 문제베 동에디 세토마소 아주 문제베 동에 치슈디 소리디 시토마소 디 세토마소 매버 수토마소 문제베 강에 친구디 소리디야 매버 수토마소스 이 시라 시제기 밀레체기 시제기 강에 친구디 소리디 랑자디도
시제
베이직스 그래다 시제 강에
네네네
시제 강에 디도 매버 수토미도스 저런 디수주나.
So if we think about it, we've all tried really hard. We've tried so hard to overcome our different problems and suffering. In our lifetime so far, we've tried so hard to overcome them. And we can bear a certain level of problems and difficulties that we experience, right? And even with certain medical treatment, we can overcome a degree or a level of our problems and suffering, right? But we haven't yet been able to overcome all of our suffering, right? We're still experiencing, like Rinpoche is saying, the basis of our suffering is still there. We haven't been able to overcome the ongoing basic level of suffering that we have. So we can overcome certain level, but we haven't been able to get rid of it completely. And yeah, so this greatest suffering of this foundational level that we are ongoing for us, we may have tried 10 times, 1,000 ways, 100,000 different ways to overcome the different sufferings and this underlying suffering that we have, but we haven't yet been able to put a stop to it.
이치 매바당 아니 리와당 도바치다와당 상루진담다 망보 코야기 딘데기 강에디 다 단데네거라 로 단도드니 쉬고는 심바마지와 차야기 강에디 랑자디디샤마도 디 뇽르치미도 디 매버스도미도.
So actually we can see in this world that there's like a mutual state of distrust between people sometimes, and we have high expectations of each other, right? And so these things are like the underlying state of unhappiness in our mind, our mental unhappiness, right? That's our current condition, right?
다 근데 인디가라 간수 단대 봐도 강에 참아 매버 수액이 터시 제버레디 터시 딜러 때네 터시지 가수 지고 제리고 가수 터시지 지고 레디 터시 딜러 때네 가수 문제베 강에 다 춘유만 주디수도 파샤 강에 지금 파샤스라고 그래 강에 친구들도 파샤 아니 친구들 파샤 춘유한테도 제디야 하랑 매버 수마토바 근데지 차디샤 다디 가르만지 버렸어 야미나 강에 세디 때네 매버 수에디 매버지 강에 때네 매버 수에 dunge 자원에 매버 수에디 용에 매버지 인고를 야미나 디리 야미나 나주 dunge 세에다 강에 세기 탈랑디 지 느기요 말 다디로 탈랑디 지 핀순 수바지다 탈랑디 양다버지 스니 창오지 참여비 따르 로 그래서 딘데지 마도 루사요 말다.
So far, we've tried to implement different ways to overcome different suffering, right? And we've been successful with certain level of problems that we can overcome, right? But if we think about it, we kind of leave aside the deepest underlying suffering and problems that we have, and we just try and manage the small sufferings and problems that we have. And even so far, we haven't been successful in overcoming any of that. And so then we have to look and see, well, it's either the case that it's impossible to completely bring an end to our suffering. Right? That's one possibility. It's either impossible to put a complete end to our suffering, or the way that we've been going about trying to become free of our problems has not been like a successful, not been an accurate way, not been the most excellent way to overcome our problems and suffering.
다 디인디가라 디숨바레 간수 동해 매버 수액이 터시 제버레디 아니 간수 동해디 동해 모마디 가레인 바디 간수기 원진 야부지 제토문도 상제 존인데 디숨바레 좋아 동해디 가레인 바 동해 용해기 자오스라고 그러다 자오랑 세면 간들 동해디 모마 트버이나 동해디 가레인 바 마시버이나 강해디 가레인 바 마시나 강해디 강라 되니 용배 주의 가리인 버디 자원이 시에요. 시에상 간수 등의 시에기 터는 가수 제외이네요. 가서 그래. 단가이네요. 등의 시마도 받아. 등의 용대디 투서디 가수 등의 문제 야부 투면도. 강해디 문제 야부 시투면도. 시에상 뇌라 등의 문제 야부 투고 그랬지. 등의 데마도 숨었다. 니니 등의 밥에 데모시 등의
So we try to overcome suffering we do what we can to overcome it, but actually we're not actually able to identify what real suffering is. So what we think is suffering hasn't got the full measure. We're not actually able to identify what real suffering is. And so if we're not able to identify correctly what suffering is, then we can't apply the right remedy to overcome that suffering, right? And so this is what the Buddha pointed out, that we're unable to identify what actual suffering is. And so in order to make that clear, to be able to identify what suffering is, then the Buddha first taught the truth of suffering.
Dunge di muchue wala, sheza dunge jimba song duwa. Nganzu dunge iba ngunzen che de di, dunge ji dunge se di. Di jibu ma do, ji subu ma diwa cha, katu subu ma diwa chaya da, ani ngu na de lo suba da, ji subu la na ze wangi ma diwa chaya juro. Ani dana shi mindiyo batinde chungye, dizu che di ma do, dile gene dunge gi jimba dile ting saba chi yo bati, masu dunamido, ting asu di yo marta kaso urta. Dile ting saba dunge chi yo be ngunzen di, masu chetu yo marta.
So far, what we identify as suffering is what is actually known as the suffering of suffering. And so that's like obvious suffering that we have, like sickness in our body or a headache or not getting what we hoped for. These kind of things we can already identify as suffering. But the Buddha said that this is only the suffering of suffering. The Buddha actually taught a deeper level of suffering, and we're not actually able to identify that. We don't look for anything else as suffering. So we only identify this coarser level. We don't look deeper and see a more extensive type of suffering. We're not even aware of it.
다 양 지슈 신다진의 슈웨이나 동해라 가서 오다. 류라 템베 동해 슬라벤티라니 양미도. ingela tusi 슈잖아. 간드라 동해라 초 동해게 심바지당 지 초동에 세주로 feeling 초동에 심바지당 초동에 게 멤버 있네요. 초나기 차네 되어인 거 있네요. 이니 된라 동해랑 신인데 봐. 신선 초 동해게 심바 당부디 가서 초동에디. 초동에 초디와 초당녀세 송요 봐. 그래서 디 초동에들. 딩아 중은 초디들. 장무차는 장무차기 루선 초들. 이 초동에 이런 거 지지. 다 초여왕의 제외 있는 초디와인 뭐 있느냐? 된라 동해랑 신이딩이 딘데기 이런 거 지지. 양 초동에지 초디와지 초디와야 멤버 있느냐? 초디와도 동해 가야 멤버 있느냐? 초디와도 동해니 용배 디 용의 시지 경기 단대 말아 주기 류신이 요러 류드신 딘데기 림바지지 림바송도 요레스.
So there's the suffering, which is a feeling that we experience, and that's the level that we identify to be suffering. The suffering that's the suffering experience or feeling that we have, right? So that's the first level of suffering. But there's another feeling that we experience, which is a comfortable or pleasant feeling, a feeling of happiness. And we don't actually identify that as suffering, but the Buddha explained that this feeling, which on the surface looks like or feels like a pleasant feeling to us, is actually underlying that. It's a type of suffering. It's called the suffering of change. So that's the second level of suffering. It's the feeling which, so you have the suffering of the feeling that's a suffering experience, unpleasant experience or feeling, and then there's this more pleasant or happy feeling, which seems to be happy to us, but actually behind that is this suffering, so it's the suffering of change. And then there's another type of suffering that's neither a pleasant feeling or an unpleasant feeling. It's the basis underneath the basis of those feelings, which is our current physical and mental continuum, of our current body and mind. That's the underlying deeper third level of suffering.
디 숭교다 디 빼는 가서 디어로 바바긴 나차 바베 나차지 제세 바베 나차진도 바바긴 나차지요 마차야 소리 다디 제네세 바베 나차 디유디강라 디 마디레디강라 마디강라 가서 어디 가서 추순을 근데 차추순을 로가 있나 마디 수제야 되지 수제와 사고에 나수다야 돼 나수다야 돼
Painful relax.
비행그래 나수다 디 초등이들 다디 마디도스 유디강라 마kambu 순르지 유베거라 나순도스 추디강라 디와치리도 디 초디와들 마크라랑디 두제지 동네다부터 두제지 동네 좀 송도 마디강라 사출로수나 수제지 디 동네지 마디 사주만로버지 만도스 강부예비걸 추디강라 디월레디 초디와다부티시 마디 마크라랑 다 디와 딘제기 초디와다 초동에 강에 매베 거기 마디 두제지 동네지 진송 다 딘제기 초디와다 동네니가 용해기 시디 수기지 그랬으나 마디지로 세상 디비리다 example 비지 다 가수 남준기 초디와 초동네지 가수 남준기 초디와지 디니가 용해기 시디 만화수 단대기 루신이 디지고 디 두제지 동네지 송구도
So Rinpoche has given an example for us to get an idea of this. So if we have a skin disease and then we have like a wound on our hand, right? If you put some hot water on it, it's going to be painful, right? It's going to hurt. So that's like the suffering of suffering. And then when it settles down, and then later on, when you scratch it, you get like a satisfying, comfortable feeling, a pleasant feeling when you're scratching it, right? So that's like an example of the suffering of change, right? Or this pleasant feeling, the suffering of change. And then the wound itself, that's like the basis upon which we can experience the unpleasant feeling or the pleasant feeling. The wound itself is like the compounded suffering that we experience, the third deeper level of suffering. So this is an example, to illustrate that in the same way, we have an unpleasant feeling or suffering feeling, that's the suffering of suffering. And then when we have a pleasant feeling, or a comfortable, happy feeling, that's the suffering of change. And then there's and then our body and mind, that at this current state now, that's like the basis for the other two sufferings, and it's neither a pleasant feeling or an unpleasant feeling, right? But it's a suffering that is neither of those two. It's the underlying basis for those suffering, our current body and mind.
디 인디강라 가서 그래. 다 등에 등문에 시고에디 초 등에디 등에 임방아수 시고래. 디 시네 딜라 펜베 미주제다 미사야다 수령 아주 지도. 다 초디어디 등에 랑신 임바디 아주 시투요 말에 초디어래. 디지 용디강라 초낭라 디제기 초낭 요르디 이네 디 문에 전에기 된담배 대와 츠니 버레스나 디 마레스 송고로 디시 다 디니니가 요행이 시다부디 수이지기로스나 단대 가난 수 풍부디 단대 풍부가 디 나니 루지 풍부의 넘버십 풍부 다랑 지고레스 단대 풍부디 지고 세상 단대기 풍부디기 등에 초디어의 등에 요행이 시다부디 지기에 인디가나 당 아주 단대 봐도 초등에 디 네거 가야 터시 집어마도 초등에 디 딸디 등에든 주에 등에다 저번 도시 등에 숨부 디순르지 요르다 가서 우리 준제 순르지다 주던 제부 순르지 요르다 간들 초등에 디 등에 임시 대마도 초디어디 등에 랑신 번 가서 시고 말 디 가서 doja tatu sun sil zigdo la cho dewa di jue dunya res ko juan jugre ko la ma zu dunya chi res di sun go ra ta dini niga yong gi shi jing di dande phumbu dirida 그래서 풍부디 예외 진라 초 되어도 초 두년이부디 리시 매베거 리시 나고요 거거라 매버 차이요냐 로 거거라 매버 차이요냐 뒤띵도 매버 짠 차도 말했어 그래서 시징이 풍부디 가서 나부져야 되고 풍부디 나부져야 돼요 인자 풍부디 초 되어도 두년 용이 시지고 그래서 그래서 시디 동해인부 자원이 많던 것이시네 시디 나부지야 되디간라 아니 동해던 주 동해디 자원이 가도 말했어 디스거든 디디 세부차
And so the experience of suffering or the suffering feeling that we have, the physical and mental suffering that we have, we can identify that, and then we can get different treatments and remedies to heal that temporarily, right? These different suffering that we have. Whereas the pleasant feeling that we have, we don't actually identify with that with suffering, and we actually hold on to that as the best we've got. Like we think of that as the best happiness that we can get. And so we don't recognize that that's suffering, but actually this suffering, this pleasant feeling that we have, actually it's by nature changes, right? So it's explained to be like the suffering of change. The pleasant feelings that we have, they don't last, right? And so they come to an end, and so they're in the nature of change. And so although we think that it's the best happiness, it's not an ultimate state of lasting happiness. This pleasant feeling that we have, it is a pleasant experience. It is a feeling. It appears to be a happy feeling, a happy experience, and so that's why it's called a pleasant feeling. But it's not the ultimate lasting happiness because it's in the nature of changing. It disappears. It doesn't last. So it's not the ultimate lasting happiness. That because we think it's the best we've got, we hold on to that. And so then there's, like we said before, underlying those two the unpleasant feeling and the pleasant feeling, or the happiness and suffering feelings, are our current body and mind. And Rinpoche is saying that these three have like a cause and effect relationship. And so the unpleasant feeling and the pleasant feeling, or the happiness and suffering that we experience, they happen on the basis of this body and mind, right? So while we're able to sometimes alleviate temporary sufferings that we have, temporary problems that we have, we're not able to completely put an end to it because we have this underlying body and mind, which is our current body and mind, which is the basis for those feelings of happiness and suffering. And because we hold on to this body and mind, we kind of take ownership of this body. And so for that long that we have that, then we have the suffering of change and the suffering of suffering.
现在在这是他人不恰面的上路忙不当过恰个是看到谈的一个让属于碰碰的越为人了下大的的碰碰的这几越为人了是吧碰碰的这几让春节了谈的让说生个年当进多恰当的希望都具备生进多你么不他说继续越的给你么不사院 지역이 사변의 바샤의 뒤주 땡차와 유대킹이 단대 가랑수 생기 내당지도 다 간데 단대 가랑수 류생기 내당디 모트 내외 진라 동해지 동해당 주 동해로 디니다 다 동해지 동해기 나오고 동해다 빠지면 지요로 뒤주다 카체토에 자원이 요 말했어 就帮助找你要嘛意思。对。谈的马上属于碰不地，其实越为人了，其实那为人了。你就东眼当，东眼就找你帮助要嘛意思。但东眼呢，那做不起要了。东眼被那些咱们的那点参谋的东眼空了的。
So actually we have to think about this quite a lot. While we have this body, and while we have this mind in its current state, then we can see in our mind we have different afflictions, our attachment and aversion, anger, right? And so in our mind we have the seeds of our different afflictions, our attachment and anger and so forth. And so for as long as we have this body and mind in this current state, then we're going to have to experience the suffering and the suffering of change. We can't actually put a stop to it so long as we have this current body and mind. Because we can see there's such a variety, so many different types of physical and mental suffering that we experience, right? So long as we have this body and mind, then we can't abandon or put a stop to the suffering and suffering of change.
Oh, that car kuyen mishi. That gandra. Adi. DJ. That din indigala. She's on Dungele tend to Tawashi, Chungu Yuba, Tandegi Naransugi, Nedang, the Saman Yodanko. Tandeng Naransugi, Jiwan, the Nish Pumpun, the Nish Nayati, Lang the Edi, Zawan Meva Suguorda, Tande Pumpun, the Nish Lang the Orda, Pumbu, the Lang the Orda. That is all in one limba chichi. Tandegi Nedan, the Samabang Gunjulu area. She's a D, Lodigan Gunjulu was Naku. Meva Sametango, Gunjulu.
Oh, Gunjulu.
That's a metal. That Tandre down the Sametango, Mevasu. Tande Manasuine down, Pumbun the Regiledan, Lundin de la Dine, Tande, Nasune Danti, Zawane, the Meva Switchine, Lubun the Regi Zawan Milimbachi. So, Pumbun the Regi Zawan Milimbachi. No more Bishan, the Juni Lundin Regiland, the Zawan Mevachi. That Suguora. She's a Tandegi near Danti, Pa, Meva Masubadu, Dungel. Tendo Tatoe Zauni Omaris. Carson doing the Jew doing an answer and they Lund Haran Latini Undigores.
So if we want to completely put a stop to, completely become free of the suffering, then we have to put a stop to taking up another body like this, another body and mind like this. And so we need to turn it around, so to say, that we don't want to take up another body that's produced from karma and afflictions. So that's what we need to do. If we want to completely put a stop to, until we can not, like at the moment we've taken up this body that's produced from karma and afflictions. So if we want to put an end completely to our suffering, then what we need to do is put a stop to taking up another body, a mind that is produced from karma and afflictions. Otherwise, we won't be able to attain a complete freedom from suffering.
The Jiwa Lembas na Lundin de Lembas lava in the Jiwa Lemba Lu Lembas na Jiwa Davreda. She's on Jiwa Lemugo down, Dindegi Jiwa Tandeng Aransu Jiwa Disorder. Masu Tandeng around Sugi Lun to this Lambatilla, Tandeng around Sugi Jiwa, the this Lambasate, Sigoro. She's on Dindegi Jiwa di Ludi Zawan Lemugoba. O di Lemugoba down Tandegi Lulian di Lun Dindeji Jadu Lian di Tsangmanche Badu, doing it Tatue Omares. That di Sungur, that di Tarimbuji, Ero Tarimbujini, Sang down the Shelmatu, the Katugatu. Disunity Mide. Chiransu Karchagio Mishi. Then Asuji Nanjun, Angelo Mambu Kudizan, this Angelo Conde Sully Chadi Ore in a Sebu Chagio Mishimason. Tandegi Lundinesi, Lemugoba, Lulemba Panches in the Lulemugoba, Machagi Padu, Dunia Pantu Mares discourse.
And so when we talk about taking a birth or like taking up this body, it's like it means the same thing. Having taken a rebirth or taking up a body, right? Having this body is our current birth, current state, right? And so this body that we've got, it came about, the body that we've taken up in this life through karma and afflictions. So long as we have this body, we can't be free of suffering. Right, so what we need to do is to take up a body that is not propelled by karma affliction, so not like this one, in order to overcome it. And so Rinpoche says we need to think quite far ahead, really, and maybe is not sure what understanding we've got from what Rinpoche is sharing, and maybe for some of us it makes sense, maybe for some it doesn't, maybe for some we're hearing it, but it's not, it's not quite, we're not quite understanding it, and so. But this is the state that while we have this current body, because of what produced it, then for as long as we're alive in this body, we can't completely put a stop to our suffering.
다 류림바 딜라 된다 요 말에 딜라 땡네 된 친구 두에 요 말에 시진 러기 요 말에 륜딜라 땡네 된 친구 두에 요래 타바도 단제 친구 고만 두에 요로 제디 륜딘데지 랑니 대바이나 륜딘데지 랑바 디장기다 지버스리 제바이나 륜딜라 땡네 륜디에 춘시가 아니 륜딜라 땡네 차유둥에 장유둥에 아니 나잔담도 징이버도 체수는 나잔나수바 디요 상마 용약이 사변순들이 가서 나부지에 되었습니다. 그래서 다류 같이 먹고 같이 야부지 유에스라고 있는데 최대 제비인데 류 야부 같이 유에스라고 있는데 나잔담도 용야다 강연담도 체약이 가서 그래 ninga mewe lu ji jiang yao ma dan zang lin di nang lo mi sun de ji yin ba yin ya jin yin ba ji de che su na chu cha chu cha de go di chang ma ne dang ji ju rin do xie zang lun di lu len ba kurang ji won din de ji len ba kurang ni dung ye gi za wa re dung ye xin tang jie yong ye gi za wa re di sun gu do.
So, but we don't say that having this body, that this body or this life has no meaning. Actually, through having this body, we can accomplish great meaning of liberation or enlightenment. Right? But just having this body or just having this life alone doesn't make it special, because we can see that if we meet with, like if we sometimes get too hot or sometimes get too cold, so that by having this very body, when we meet with like inconducive or negative conditions, it's already set up to experience the problems and pain that come from that. We experience the heat or cold, these conditions that make us feel, too hot or cold, suffering experiences that we have, right? So when we meet, because of just having this very body, then when we meet with different negative conditions, then we experience different problems and suffering just because of having this body at the very basis. So we can achieve a great meaning with it, but just by having this body, it's this basis for suffering.
다 안도디네 쉬워이나 단대기 륜디 지시 예외진라 아니 둥에지 둥에다 카테토예요 말에 디 매버 수토예요 말에 디 용하기 닌가디 매버 차예요 말에 엔다나 신기 가서 그래 단대가랑 수기 상당당다죠. 단대가랑수 상당다디 가르쳐 버다 차단 당도랑는 주야기 차단 당도랑바 되샤 다 시당다 공부의 기술들이 가르치고 있나야 그 지주지시니 디다 나부지시니 도시 침이나 아니 생기 가서 우리 이미 뒤에 디 용야기 닌가디양 가토야요 마디 용야디양 가서 우리 진지토야 디 체토에 요마 그 모든이 용어되지 도시 차디기 그랬어.
So as long as we have this body, then we have to experience the suffering and the suffering of change. And then when we willingly take up, like in our mind, we like readily set a place for our attachment and our aversion, our dislike of things, right? So long as we hold on to these minds of attachment and of aversion, which just rise up so easily in our minds, then we're not going to be able to overcome our mental suffering as well.
Listen. 그다지하고. 제가 디인상 상제 중에 대기 동해 무추고 그래. 세상 동해 무마추가 있나? 동해 봉야기 타랑디 양다부지 무마레스 동행이 중무죄와 무죄도에 용마레스 동행 무죄지와 진짜 동행 무죄집에 가도딜라 동행 림바 송 무죄지니 동행 주의 동행 차번도시 동행에서 림바 송 무죄지기도 다 림바 당부디 나 참여하고 그래 다 동행 용행이 시다고 지에디 주의 동행 지워 로 주의 동행에서는 이거는 초디와 사제기 초디와들 다 내가 좀 디와들 디야 동해 랑신이바 딩가서 다부지야 되고로 다 군인이가 용액이 시다우디 단대 가랑수기 내다 다가랑스스 풍부들이 가랑수기 단대 풍부 다가랑스스 그래서 디피디 다기디 바베기 나선 제스기 나서디 제니세 디기 디강라 사축된데 로나 수제그레스 디 동해지 디강의 추바이나 디 강부차의 추바이나 대화지기래 소 대화지리래스 다 디니니가기 시디 수지기스는 바베나선 제네디지기래스 로 다시해서 제네 바네디 디강라 사줄루니 수제기 소 동에디 매버 수알라 로 디강라 사줄루바이나 수제주로 수제기 동에디 매버 수이나 뇌가 가르메고 수구스나 제니 바베 나서 코로나 메고 마수나 디 수제 메고 수에디 민두아 진소 가이스나 자오디 바니디 데디고로 다야 바니디 추니 리시 디와다비기 초 디오지오레 디 아니 디와라 통지지 가지고 있는 디 때문이나 디 시디 바니디 제니디 본토에 코나 요마로 세상 디추벌의 니니 중에 초디와 추비디와 사제기 초디와 따부디 딘데기 초디와디 가수래 전담의 디와 많이 봐. 로 디와 지 가수 디와 띵부지당 디와 뭐마지 많이 봐. 그 진진 루브르기 진지 용규여 봐. 딘데 장신 뭐 마도 풀了타투 라니 디와 지퇴 딘데기 디와지 많이 보지 통도 토네 디양파 봉야기 시지 제발라 제국교 디 제발라 자오딘 제니디 바니디 고 매우수고도 신소 바베나
And so if we want to be able to completely put an end to our suffering, completely overcome our suffering, then we need to be able to identify exactly what is suffering. And so the suffering of suffering, the suffering feeling that we experience, we all can recognize that, we all know that to be suffering, right? But the suffering of change, the pleasant feeling that we experience, it's hard for us to recognize that that's suffering, right? Because we experience a little bit of pleasure from it, a little bit of temporary pleasure from it. So we kind of hold on to that to be happiness. We don't recognize that to be suffering. And then the very underlying suffering that for which the suffering of suffering and the suffering of change, or the unpleasant feeling and the pleasant feeling from which they come, is this very body that we have at the moment. And so as long as we're not able to recognize that that itself is suffering, then we're not going to be able to completely put an end to the suffering of suffering and suffering of change as well, which arise from that. So again, looking at that example that I gave earlier of the skin disease where we have a wound. So if we put salt water in the wound, then it really stings, it's really painful, isn't it? And so that's the experience of suffering, unpleasant feeling. But then when it dries up a bit and then we scratch it, we have this pleasant feeling. It's a little bit of a light relief, isn't it? And we kind of, because it feels good in that moment, we kind of buy into that to being happiness. But actually, it's in the nature of change. Like, it doesn't last, does it? It came about due to causes and conditions, and there's a moment of temporary relief, a moment of pleasant experience, but it doesn't last, does it? Because why? Because underlying is the skin disease, the wound there. So long as that wound is there, then it's going to give rise to either the suffering of suffering when you put salt water on it, or the suffering of change, the pleasant feeling when you scratch it when it's dry. So as long as we have the underlying wound there, which is likened to the compounded suffering, the foundation or the basis for other types of suffering. So long as that's there, then we can't overcome the suffering. So because we buy into the temporary pleasant feeling as being the happiness, then we don't actually recognize that to be suffering, but we have to recognize that it came about through causes and conditions. It doesn't last, it's a temporary feeling, and so long as the wound is there, then we're not going to be able to be free of it, because the conditions might come for it to come again. And so, the Buddha said that we need to recognize these three levels of suffering. So like this example, the suffering of the unpleasant feeling, the suffering of suffering, the pleasant feeling, which is actually a nature of change, and so it's called the suffering of change, and then the underlying body that we have, so long as we have this body, that's the compounded suffering that's underlying them. And if we want to when we try and alleviate the temporary sufferings that we have, because they're under the power conditions, then they causing conditions, then they can come back, right? So what we need to do in order to completely put a stop to it is to get rid of the underlying suffering, this compounded suffering.
다 ngaransu 가르쳐야 되었으나 바베 나선 제네디 추베이나 디와지에 줘라디 추비 초 디와지에 여러 중세지 딜러 차네 바베 나사디 자원이 미주지 이미스지 다부자디 거다 나수 딘다고 차디 거다
민주주의
고대 최선 단나가수 바베 나사지 요르슬라임바 디 추베이나 디와 춘준지 초 디와지에 여러 다디 디와디 나수 간데스 간데다고 차디 요르스나 당가랑수기 내다디 나수 내다디 가르쳐야 되었으나 빼차샤나 빼나 딜 임바스나다 바베 나사디 추나 디와치에요로 다 딘데기 디와치중 딜 차네 딜 센차네 디구게 디다란 지기도 세지네 바베 나사디 도난코나 지금을 샤샤고다 디미주 지미스고다 제고에 민도스 샤긴스 다 샤네 바네 나서디 휴치치치 침보이는 수부 참말을 쳐지시네 타마디 쥐마도야 아니 미주 제메가 차지네 수수 소다 제바 참마 쇼도로 신송 마수 디순게 지레스 마수 디다부치 간레스너디 마수 나주 사제기 초되어 되베 연된의 차지네 되베 dewas na kude su la tembe su idon la tembe dewa danding bu la tembe dewa ni khala shimbu seba la tembe dewa rija jangbu nyangsu nyumba la tembe dewa rija idon nyangsu nyumba la tembe dewa tindegi dewa la cha ne darang gu khor chi ne phumbu rangja sha sha go da nga su ro phumbu di la cha chi ne rangja sha sha di sha ne phumbu di la cha ne mo tu ne 풍부디 랑치시네 아니 맞어 뒤띵지 디와 타도기 디와디 맞어라 마좀 버시시네 에다 가서 요하이메 버차시네 부장진부투니 시에는 가뒤는 동에 용고에지 차디고래 디니 총벌 진선 비데 되니부디
So Rinpoche gave an example and then the meaning. So going back to the example of the wound, the skin disease. So when we scratch the skin, the wound, then we get a pleasant feeling from that, don't we? We get some relief, and we get attached to that pleasant feeling with it, and we think, oh, that's enough. We can alleviate that discomfort by scratching it, and we feel that's enough, right? And we get attached to that pleasant feeling, and then we don't. Because we think it's enough, we leave it at that. We don't look to curing the underlying wound. And so we leave it at that because of being attached to the pleasant feeling that we get this temporary relief, and we just leave it at that. But then if we leave it at that, there's a danger that the skin disease then goes up the arm and then takes over the whole body if we don't treat it. Because when we just feel satisfied with the temporary relief, the pleasant feeling, we don't treat it, then there's a danger that skin disease could even really take over the body and then become untreatable, and we could even die from it, right? It's possible. So that's what happened. We don't treat it because we're attached to the temporary relief and pleasant feeling that we get. And so like that's like our current experience as well. So when we have, because of our attachment to pleasant feelings, pleasant experiences that we have, we get attached to the pleasant objects of desire, like delicious foods and seeing beautiful forms and feeling soft and pleasant touch sensations and things. So because we get attached to those pleasant feelings from those different sensations, those pleasurable sensations, then we just feel like, oh, that's enough, and we just think that our happiness is good enough there. So then we don't look to overcome the underlying basis of our current situation, of this body that we have. So do you see how the example and the meaning match up?
卷面都记了嘛？现在第一章，동해지 동해단 주 동해 니부디 되기 매워이나 하버도 동해지 동해 되기 매워이나 딘니가 용서기 시 바니 다부디 단대 풍부디 차디고 그래서 디 동해랑 신이 디방고 그래서 그래서 단대 풍부 다라 동해랑 신라 동해랑 신이 뭐디 못 주나도 상지 중대.
So if we want to overcome or get rid of the suffering of suffering and the suffering of change, then we have to get rid of the underlying basis for those sufferings, the compounded suffering of this body. So we need to recognize that to be suffering in order to have the wish to overcome the suffering.
디 부장 전복이 동해 참아 자매도 동해기 계제 디왕도 제니 시고로 가쇼라고 되는라고 지리 쇼라고 쇼 강기 계제 디수 제디 동해 자원이 매고 수야기 계제 디 시고 좋아 디 동해 띠니 매고 수야기 타버 토야기 디 쇼기 쇼스나고로 디 쇼를 그래서 그냥 타베 쇼의 양조야기 디 계제 디 시디고로 디 다른 거지 계제 쓰고래 딘라고 자기도 사다 나랑수 체시기 초디와의 초 동해기 원트진이 시베이나야 만주기 초디와 조당다 초 동해 본당기 타랑디 시라기 다 가서 그래 하나 둔두던 잡은다고 그러시았어 그러다 둔두 애니멀 둔두 여러 둔두 신사 잡으차디 시았어 나도 상당다.
So if we're thinking about completely overcoming for good, the long-term suffering to change, if we're looking at completely overcoming all that suffering, that's a really long-term kind of plan, a long-term view that we have. But if we just bring it back to now, like just thinking of when we want to if we just want to overcome the temporary suffering and change, like we do at the moment, like the temporary suffering that we experience and the suffering and change that comes up, we just want to try and get rid of that, then that's actually similar to an animal.
This word. 초 디와 용야기 주주디 나랑수 상당다스 나주 상당다 초 디와 용야기 터시 주디 가르치도 슬어디간라 슈르지 미진 수이동의 단힘보다 디주 조지지네 간들 나랑수기 디제기 주주디 슐로라 요바디 디 원진지도 나수디 나랑술 디제 유행이 주주디 슐로라 요래상 디 진디기도 디 제네 아니 나술 디제 유행이 주주디 가드이나야 슐로라 요래진이 시기 진 야부두야 시기 튠진 루디야 디지우지 상당디기도 아주.
So when we look at trying to get the suffering of change, this pleasant feeling, then what we identify or we think to be the cause of our pleasant feeling is we think of something outside of us, don't we? Like pleasant sights, pleasant smells, pleasant tastes, and things like that. So we believe, or we think like that, and we think that our happiness comes from the external things that we think bring us the happiness, the pleasant sounds, sights, and tastes, and so on, right? And so, we believe, or we think that our happiness, that when we're trying to establish this pleasant, when we're trying to find this happiness, this happy feeling, this pleasant feeling, we think that it comes from outside, from the external conditions, don't we?
다나시 나초를 동해 용역이 주주 대양 초 동해 지춘배 수수를 동해 용역이 주주 대양 슐로로 요래 전에 수수를 강에 체베 가도딜라 미신다가는 주주도 쿠나라 도자신이가 강에 체소 쿠나라 지지진이 체소 아니 디 나라 무이면서 나라 동해 용송 나라 캄바면서 나라 강에 체소 지지니 동해 용역이 주창마 슐로로 샤고도
Likewise, the suffering that we experience, the mental unhappiness that we experience, we also think that comes from outside, don't we? We think, someone done me wrong, someone else harmed me, or because I haven't got money, because I haven't got a house. We think that the external things are the main cause of our suffering as well, don't we?
Interesting. 계산 디제디가라 나랑출라 디오트킹기 주디안 슐로로 요레친 동해 트레킹기 주디안 슐로로 요레친 초 디오 데르직 수수로 초 디오 트레킹기 주주디안 슐로로 요레친 초 동해 트레킹기 주주디안 슐로로 요레친 디가라 시 튠진다 시 게진이부디 튠진다 게진이부디 시 튠진스나 가르스나 주 되베연딩아들 조디 주다티 루리야 되베연디 디나로라 벤주르당 캄바당 마다다 투부다 투무다 참아디난 추디어다 디지 다 시인게진디 가릴라온디가 수수기 자우다 수수라 아니 민데바 투도 버데기 진이바 차고 중데야 디수치디 무이메바다 아니 가리 다길러데 캄바메바다수 투메바다수 디수치디 다 디수체디 수수기 디제기 주타토바다 동행이 주타토바를 통해 다 군수제디 수수기 디에기 주 시기 슈르르 유데비 디에줄을 통해 디수제디 수수기 다 저년 타토 숨지를 지도아 저년 타토 저년 타토 저년 타토 지지지 엔다 다른 디마도 상다이밍이 지디 아주 지디 거레스 디야 왜 수다 다다 디 말에서 상지 디 숨버레스
And so the suffering that we experience and the happiness that we experience, we're so sure, we think that the root cause of them come from outside of us, right? Think that all of our problems and suffering come from the people who harm us or say bad things to us or not having money or not having a house and things. So we think that the root cause of our problems, our mental suffering, we think that they're outside of us, right? And we think that we think that the cause of our happiness and our mental pleasure, that those things are also outside of us. You know, we think of our close ones, our loved ones, our family, and all the objects, the senses, the sights and smells, pleasant sights, sounds and smells and tastes and so forth, that they're all the main cause of our happiness, right? We believe in that. And so then we look to bring about all the conducive conditions. And we look to try out the external. We really take care with our external conditions to make sure they're all good and comfortable and good for us. And we try to reduce the bad conditions to prevent ourselves from experiencing the problems and suffering. Right. So we're trying to sort it all out outside of us, and thinking that that in looking after bringing towards the positive conditions and getting rid of the inconducive conditions, then we think that we'll be all right. But and we pin all our hopes on, and the way Rinpoche expressed it, it's like we have this sort of sense of ultimate refuge in. We take refuge in these external things to be the source of our happiness and our problems. But actually, the Buddha taught that actually that's not in line with reality. That's not in accord with the way things are. Pinning our ultimate sense of refuge or reliance on these external things. That's not in line with reality.
다 세상 나주기 디어 조당디 고 슐로라 튠진 야당네 디어 조야디 차디고 시 튠진 야的 당네 디어 조야 터시 디차디고 다디 디기 디어 조투 마레스 시 튠진 야제 동네 디제 편송 초바지 용규여바 이나 다 시 튠진 딘레지 참바이나 디어 편송 초바데 덴바 차그레스이지 땡케버 순르지 요고로 베나 배샤 무 봉지 여바이나 디제 편송 초바다 덴바 땡케버레 세순르 딘레기 체 손에 유디버지 로 지고르디 디 요마레스 뭐 망부 유킨야 미치마지고 요래 뭐메 디자 메킨라야 미치지우지니 데킨 요래 세상 디 다가르 뜬거스나 디제 유의 메세 미치지부 유의 메세디 시 튠진 조 마인바 난상 당당 투니 임버디 세부 뜬용고레스.
So we think that making everything, all the positive conditions around us, surrounding ourselves with all the positive conditions, really improving our external conditions, that's going to bring about our state of lasting happiness, right? But if that was the case, then there would have to be like a limit that you would say where we can achieve that. For example, like if we had all the comforts and everything, if we had a lot of wealth, like they'd have to say, like if you had $100,000 or if you had £1 million, that would be the level at when you achieve happiness, right? If our most excellent lasting happiness was achieved from the external conditions, from gathering the positive external conditions, then there would be a limit that we reach where we can say yes, that when you get there, then you get lasting happiness. But as we can see, there are people who are really wealthy, have a lot of money, but they're unhappy. And there are people who don't even have very much at all, but they're happy, right? So that's a sign that shows that and however good the external conditions are, there's no measure of that which can determine that we will be happy or not, right? And so what that also shows is that it depends on our attitude. It depends on our attitude to whether we're going to be happy or not.
다 내 인상 낭상루기 낭로들이다. 수수 상루 낭로라 상루 동당라 조지 땅치지네. 조지 땅치지네. 조땅 상루 당당은 조땅네. 가르 중바 있는 양 안지 가수거래 몰린 토킨 몰린치 토킨 로 가르 있는 양 용시버래. 가르 있는 양 차시버래. 다 디인자 간제지 차바 있네야 수수기 딜러 빠바지 제 디的 창바지 로 간내주 간제지 중바 있네야 디당 창비 수수기 턱시지 띵주제 마도 디 마인베 랑가 턱시 간야매바 진송 가르 있네야 용시바 고对가르 있네야 용시바 진님보다 진상부 가르 있네야 쳇시바 로 내당 배는 가서 단대 지주 다란사기 단대 지주디 시디 야부도 다 단대 가래 이랑라 마제도 디 지주 하장기 깔래카부도 그래서 딘제기 내당디 다란살라 용시벌 그래서 시 내당디 간제지 용바 이나야 가래 이나야 용시벌 간제지 이나야 다 용시벌 디 용배 거라 디다 창배 수수기 더시지 띵고그래 디땡야마도 다시 요 말에 상치시네 진제기 외내 수당 창배 상로 당당지 마수가 있나 심버 딘제기 조지만 담아 있나 가르치네야 만지바 로 튠진 유에나야 만지바 튠진 매나야 만지바 다란살라 데네야 민지키 시제라 데네야 민지키 로 가바 데네야 민지키 가바 루네야 민지키 상로 동당딘 조지 땅마토늘이다. 센라 외내주의 창배 상당당지 수마토나 외외내야 만지키 주부외내야 만지키 매내야 만지키 가르치네 만지키 딘데지 차그레스.
And so when we meet with different circumstances in life, we can have like good experiences and difficult experiences, and if we, it's possible that anything can happen anywhere, anytime, right? Like if we think about the place we're in at the moment, it's a very peaceful, happy place, right? But then elsewhere in the world, in Iran, there's a war going on, right? Well, and that's a very difficult situation for the people going through it there. So, that could also, it's possible that it could happen here as well. There's no guarantee. So wherever we are, anything is possible. We can meet with the positive experiences or the difficult experiences, right? And so none of it is stable. And so it all depends on how we meet that with our minds, our attitude towards that. If we're able to think in line with reality, like seeing the situation as it is, and then if we're able to change our mind in relation to that, then it's possible for us to be all right in that situation, Unless we're able to, it all depends on the way that we think. Unless we're able to change our minds, to see things in a realistic way, and then able to change our minds in relation to that, then whether we're rich or poor, in a place with good conditions or not, then there are those who are rich who aren't happy. There are those who are poor who are happy. There is, so like it's all these different situations are possible for all of us, and it all depends on the way that we meet those situations, seeing them in line with reality, just seeing them as they are, and then changing our minds in relation to that. If we're not able to do that, then the problems are going to continue.
Xizang, ngaransu nangjun sang dangdang la, da ngen mitsi nanglo la, yabu yung gu yus, chubu yabu gu yus. 아니 가서 주모 야부 구유스 뭐 구유스 아니 수분 나차 매부 구유스 디상니 다 인지미지 디 구유스 디 마인바 종는 디메스 로 베나 나차 용는 자오는 디메스 나차 마용지 나 나차 마용으로지 요 자가서 자오니 마용버지 아니 구유스 지니 나차 마용바 라운 디베 디 좀바이나 미지지부 차기요. 디마종나 미지지부 차기 매디비. 딘데기 베 탈르는 상수디요 있는다. 니 미지디 나사 매버지 지고. 나사 용나 자오는 지 말에. 단 나사 용나 나 차차버리스. 나 차차버리스. 이 지기도. 나 차수 세죠로. 딘데 상다나. 다디 닌가 요다. 저. 가인스나 나사 미용버 땡케 토에 요 말에. 수수 디 자세자 개런티레. 요 말에 개런티 요 말. 다 나사 용는 가 차차버리 세기 상딜레 디 다른 단데위 나사 용베걸 아니 가 차송 시지네 다 상리 나로를 생슈 참마제와 참마 라네니 가소리 저주고 다 저주바로 다디 많이 버지 가 나사 매바야 구유 저 나사 매바이네 지부리 나사 유여이네 지부리 세지 나사 유여이네야 아니 상루 시디를 내토에기 딘데기 상동나 수고레스 다 디나신 디 참마 지버다 주부 예배 거래 지부 주부 매배 거래 지부 춘진 예배 거래 지부 매배 거래 지부 디 상당나디 디 상나로 디 수도에나 초되어디 딘데기 상당당의 땡네 좀베 되어디 초되어디 띵부되기도 가이스는 시 춘진을 하려고 말어.
So at the moment we think like, I want to have a good life. I don't want to have any problems in my life. I want to have good friends. I want to have good family. I want to have enough wealth, and I don't want to have any sickness. Right? I want to have a life that's completely free of any sickness. So if we think really strongly like that, and we feel like if I don't want to have a life with any sickness, if I get any illness, then I'm completely done for. Sometimes we think really strongly like that, and actually, if we feel like that, then we set ourselves up for problems, because no one can be sure that they can have a life completely free of sickness, right? In dependence on different causes and conditions that come along, the situation can change and we can get an illness, right? So if we already set up this strong thought that I want everything to go well, I want to have a good life, good family, good friends, no sickness, then, and have really good outer conditions, have enough money, a good house. If we think like that, then, for example, if a sickness comes along, then, we can't handle it, and we get really down from it, right? Because we've already set up this unrealistic hope for a life free of sickness. And then when a sickness comes along, then we lose our courage and we can't face it. Whereas, if we're able to think, whether I'm sick, I want a life without sickness, but if I have sickness, it's also okay. And I want friends, but if I don't have friends, it's okay. I want, if I have money, it's okay. If I don't have money, it's okay. If I have a house, it's okay. If I don't have a house, it's okay. If I meet with good external conditions or not, it's okay. If we're able to think like that, if we're able to cultivate an attitude like that, then we set ourselves up for a state of lasting happiness, right? Because it's not going to be affected by the external conditions that we meet with. Whether we meet with what things we want or not, then we're able to keep our peace of mind, right? So it's a more stable, lasting happiness, dependent on having this attitude that whatever happens is okay.
시상 디 상로동네 디 수에도 디 수투야기 랑가지 송구도와 상제존인데 기로 시상 상로딘데 땅네 수수 센시와라 네토야 생기 디제 말라바 제기 터시지 송구도와 그래서 디 장바이나 딘데기 터시디 장네 수수라 가드이나 대와말라바지 제토나 디 기사 말베 디디 기상 미 상제 종딘데 상로 동당 딘데지 러지니 가수라 가드이나야 생의 대와말라바지 용야기 터시지 송구도 말라브로 송구도 디 터시디 가수 장네 수수를 펜토나 수수를 딘데지 용토나 디 할레비 펜도 치부 말베
So this is a method that the Buddha taught for us, that there's a way that we can train our minds, right? That we can cultivate this attitude that it's okay with whatever happens. Then, in dependence on that, we create a situation for ourselves where we don't lose our happiness, right? So this is a way that the Buddha taught for us, that if we can train our mind in thinking like this, then we will not lose our happiness. So if we are able to train and cultivate in this attitude, is there some benefit in it for us? Is it something that's good for us? La.
그치, 네. 그들 녀라에 된다 딘다. 간들 가서 그래. 저 수수기 상로 당당기 토네 수수기 생기 나로라 가드이나야 생시월을 내도야 생기 난기 되어디 말라버지네 심바 바페부지 르르지 대토야디 총바이나 디 할레베 핀도 치부 말레베스 디 나주 상말로 고해지로디 다디 딘두기 신의 토네 딘데 요마로다 뭐 딘두 딘상기 신의도.
So, if we're able to cultivate this kind of attitude, then we create a state of lasting, like peaceful, happy state of mind, right? And so, this is a way that if we're able to train in thinking like this, that we can cultivate this stable, happy, peaceful state of mind, right? Now, this is the way that the Buddha taught for us, but actually, if we're able to cultivate this kind of attitude, then that's a really beneficial thing for us, isn't it? It'd be really benefit us if we can think like this. And actually, this kind of education is not found in the general education, is it, these days? In modern education.
시장 다 딘데지 상동당 가소래 네당 간데지 좀바이나야 생라 디와말라바 용야라 상루 가르당고도 슬라바이나 로 가르당고 슬라바이나 네 당부디라 지당 가랑수 단다디 통데야 가랑수 가소르다 베제 통데야 가랑수라 고야기 고베 시 튠진 디탕제 튠진다 미팅베진 디탕제 담부디라 미다베랑신 버지 상지다 로 상딜레라 도마데 디탕제 미다베랑신 주에랑신 봐 따버때만 매봐 로 다리 열라 상니 매봐 차시바 디 미다바 라바디로 아니 기지 인조원두데 미다바 참미랑신야 러와 제가 뭐 담부디 미다바 지상지다
So if we're able to think like this, that whatever circumstances we meet with, the different external conditions, whether they're good conditions or negative conditions, whatever we meet with, in order to keep our peace of mind, if we're able to train in this way of accepting whatever comes, then one way to be able to do that is to recognize that these external conditions, the positive ones and the negative ones, that they are in the nature of being impermanent. They change. When different conditions come along, they cease. And so the Buddha explained first that this nature of impermanence, that things change. So the external conditions, the external things that we meet with, that they're changing, they don't last.
다 전세 니바디라 ngansugi tunjin la tsideyagi suda jiru rijak dewe yuandin tangje dang ani ngansu mutimbe jin la tsideyagi ngejin dawu la suba ngejin mundebe jin mundebe ngubu di tangje la yuandin gi cha dang juan gi cha susu la pembe cha dang nyebe cha
And then another level is to recognize that all of the different things that we meet with, the positive situations that we meet with, the negative situations that we meet with, the pleasant objects of our senses, the sights and sounds, the smells and so forth, the pleasant ones and the negative ones or unpleasant ones that we meet with, we need to recognize that they were equal in having some qualities and having some faults.
디 다기 강라라 되기 디레 유엔양 펜투지 유엔양 쩐지 매나양 펜투지 매나양 쩐지 디 참마라 지버리다.
So they're all the same. It's like whether we have them, whether they exist, they have qualities and they have faults. And whether I don't have them or whether they don't exist, they have qualities and they have faults.
다 디지 상다 다디네 림바숨발라 디지 상다는 디도 당에디 나랑 카투야 친 가르팅용버디 슈거다 디지를 지랑수기 수다 수는 디기다 핀도예나 야 지엔다고 싫어 야 지니 당부 가르고도 니바 가르고도 상도 림바 당부 니바 컨데스탄고도 디 가사 지랑수 나는 디거 다 디네 지난 아주 지 튠베진 디 중바이나 디 중바이나 앞에 지부 용와 세디 로 디 중바이나 앞에 지부 용사를 세기 딘데기 유지여바이나 로 신선 디 중바이나 앞에 지부 요세지 딘데기 베저 자사기 유지여바이나 로다 유디를 때네 수수를 대화 용만 용세죠 로 유딜을 때니 수수를 디제 용마용세디 유크랑 지기요 말했어. 유크랑 지기요 말했어. 다 수지기요스나 수수기 생기 나라 콜라 파 되바요메디. 파 무부딜은 되바요나 무부디 중배거라 아이 총송다 나라 고야디 총송 상버들. 수수 생기 나로라 무부딜라 되바 매바 있는데 민되바 여바이나 유디 같이 짜친부 있는데 같이 린당 친부 있는데 수수의 종배거라 대화 연구 말 가부 연구 말 미가오 연구 세상 자라디 종내 수수의 대화 연구 마용세디 자라 쿠랑기 문이 시에요 말이스 친소 자라디 둔시에 시에요 말스 다 가르톤이 시에 그랬으면 수수 생기 나로라 딜은 되바 여메리스다 딜은 되바요나 디종나 가부용거리 딜은 되바면은 디종나에 가부요 말이.
So when we put our hopes in things, when we want for certain things, certain objects, then actually when we think that a certain thing or object is going to bring us happiness or make us feel good, actually it's not in the activity of the object itself. It's not that the object itself gives us that happiness or not. Whether we experience happiness or not, independence on that object, depends on how we think about that object. So if we want that object, if we want that thing, then when we get it or when we meet with it, we feel happy because we've got it. We think, I've got it now, everything's all right. But if it's another object that maybe it's a really precious thing, or maybe it's a really important thing, but if we don't want it, if we're not interested in that thing, then even if we get it, it doesn't benefit us, it doesn't make us feel good, it can even make us feel bad, right? So the object itself doesn't bring us the happiness and the satisfaction or the unhappiness, right? It's in relation to that, whether we want it or not, whether we have a hope for that, and then whether our hope is met, whether we get what we want, then we feel good. And if we don't want something, then even if we get it, it doesn't make us feel good. So it all depends on if we have a want or a hope for that object or not.
생기 반 되어 유버지 수도로 되어 유버지 참아라 참아 야버렸어야지 상당다 딘데지 수도에 요래 나 마신진 탄지라 인원기 샹바 공규여 봐 아주 인원기 샹바 마시 진주 인원기 샹바 스지네 디 인원기 샹바디 카투 제가 있는 인원기 샹바 공토에 요 말에 수수 자우디나 수수로 녀버제디요로 로 녀버제이고 그래서 디 녀버제 유에서 콜라 인원기 잠바 그 야부 용로 지나 삼루디 간데스 용도 그래 카투디라 용도예요 말 인원기 잠바디 간데스 안당 거스나 다른 부지네 단단 녀버제 유어디 녀마 야부 진유 유에스 버레스 마음발라 야부 가서 차에게 그거 매번 말했어 저 파슨 준주고다 단대 야부디 단대 수수 아마디 칭아마 수수기 다우양 차디고 그랬어. 그래서 디 뒤에서 무지를 상당히고 쿨미네 쿠수수를 야부지긴디 인상 상동도도 디나신 튠베진다 미튠베진 탕제라 아니 데벨루지에요. 디 참아 야부랬어. 근데 가서 무슨 잠불리는 외대비 잘라다 간대지 외에 있는 디 탕지 코랑코랑 주더 진기 왕기 초네 용대버지 용구야기 딘데기 차셔지래 참아 야버렸어야지 참아는 되버지 되벨로 용야지 쇠도
So it's possible for us to develop an attitude that has like a liking, or in Tibetan the dopa is like a wanting or a hope for all things, but then Rinpoche is saying it's possible for us to develop an attitude that sees everything as good, every situation as good, everything as good. Yeah, when you so then whatever we meet with, it's possible for us to have this attitude that sort of welcomes it all in. So, for example, there's this way of cultivating a sense of seeing all sentient beings, all our mother sentient beings, as appealing, as close to us, and that doesn't come immediately. Like sometimes we might meet with a person who harms us, what we call an enemy, and in that moment it's hard for us to have this sense of finding them appealing, liking, right? So, but we are able to make our minds to feel like this. How? That in the moment, with like this direct experience, it's hard for us to see them as someone appealing, but we can think about, well, in the past, they may have done something to benefit me, or in the future, it's possible that they can change and do something to help me, or be something good to me, someone good to me. So if you look more long term as well, like it's possible that even like the mother of this life was an enemy in the past, and the person who's an enemy now in the past could have been someone who helped me, benefited me, and in the future can become like that as well. So this attitude of this closeness, this affectionate love, it's called. It's one of the stages of recognizing all beings have been our mothers and recognizing their kindness, remembering their kindness. Then there's this affectionate love which sees all beings as appealing or close. So we can cultivate that attitude, can't we, by thinking more long term.
제가 디 가서 오다 아니 저기도 저 진도 상기도 다나 예 가중만 시시한 저기도
So before Rinpoche said that, he said like Rinpoche's explaining things in however it's coming to his mind, is putting things forward in this certain way, but it's for you to later on see how it all fits together and makes sense for you, to see which order you want to put it in that makes something useful for you. And with talking about seeing all sentient beings with this sense of affection and love, likewise we can do that with all the situations that we encounter, whether it's a positive conditions or negative conditions, if we can develop this attitude that it's all okay, like having I want that, the welcoming all of those situations. It's possible for us to expand our minds to think like that.
Pena susu so juyin skin ki dao duja juyin na. Adi susu le dudi pen ninga chimburo ninga chishu diro susu ki su juyin sigoro. Redi dindegi dao dil tene susu ki kisan pe chimbu len yo da. Bijana sumba nangshin jiwe na. Kar len yo rasna da dindegi dao dil mine ani karsoda dao dil ba zuba gonsla warada. Kundu malamba chechine dao di da niji kurang sanglu no chuwangi dinde yungu yore chechine kula mine ji niji dang sueba dang dinde gong chechine ro. Dinde gong yung digangla susu lang nyangling che kuka ji kuzani chungsong da. Lang nyangling che ya. Lang rinpa ngas. Lang rinpa ngas lang nga la suwa dinde lang nyangling che ya. Lang nyangling che kuka ji kuzani chungsong. 다 마세베 가사 준주 지문의 수만하신 다셔 다기셔도 신동바이나 다기셔도 신류동제나 수수 디바사고 수수 된달 미즈메 담바이나 신기체도 수수 류동제나 신기체도 수수 깔레 잡아이나 수수베 순앙 기월러우치 사고도 할레베 기워치 사고도 세상 수수기 다우치슈지인들이 뒤천배 신진 간대지연을 뒤참아 수수라 남배숑네 손다지웨이나 상제지 고방 제킨 랑냥린지 고거 제킨 다나신기베 가서 준대띵지기 낭샤디 구주 구다트주킨 로 준대기 띵지기 낭샤쇼로 디 시버 제주킹기 딘데기베 튠베진 야부지로 그래서 디나싱기 상로디 무부 탄제기 딘도 단요레스 뇌베진다 민뇌베진 디 탄제기 딘도 딘데기 상동다도 요레스 그래서 참말로 야부레스지로 수수도 뒤디스 그래 뒤서 딘주기 야부레스 그래 다 간다 참말로 가서 오르다 참말로 생용바지다 지 장비숑에 따여요치다.
And so if we look at like an example of an enemy who's about to someone who really wants them to harm you and even wanted to kill you in that moment, that's actually a really dangerous situation for us in that moment, right? And so we see that person who's someone who's trying to harm our life, they're trying to kill us, so they seem like the enemy, but actually there's another way we can look at it as well. So on top of that, there's a way that we can see actually the independence on this person becomes the object by which that I can cultivate what we call this patience, like to train in patience, to be able to withstand, to bear the difficulty that, the harm that they're doing us, to cultivate compassion, thinking, poor them, they're overpowered by their disturbing emotions, and that's why they're out to harm me now. So if thinking like that, we're able to draw on this person this immediate person who's really trying to harm us in this moment, and recognize that actually in dependence on them, I can develop these really positive states of mind that, compassion and patience, being able to not get angry in response to the harm they're doing us, to develop compassion, recognizing they're under the power of their disturbing afflictions, so poor them, and to be able to have this resilience, of this patience that's able to bear the difficulty that we're going through. These are all really positive, good things for us to develop. They give us a more spacious mind, right? And so like that also there's from the Shantideva's Bodhisattva's way of life, this text, Shantideva explains how if you're able to give up your own purpose for the sake of others, for the sake of, if we give up others' purpose for our own sake, then our mind is really narrow-minded and we experience the problems. But if we're able to give up our own purpose for the sake of others, then our mind becomes more expansive, and it's said that we accumulate a great store of merit, like a lot of positivity through being able to expand our mind like that. And also, so this all comes like independence on this person is harmonious at the moment. If we're able to think like that, then we accumulate this great merit and independence upon that person. We're also being able to develop our understanding of the law of cause and effect. And so then we can do this with any situation that we meet with, whether we meet with negative situations or positive situations, all the conditions that we meet with, we can see them all as good for us, because we can use them all, whether it's a good or bad situation on the outside, we can see it all as these good conditions for us to be able to really cultivate these really positive attitudes and minds for us that will bring us a lot of positive merit and benefit us. So we can see all situations, good or bad, whatever's coming, in an equal way, that they all can benefit us.
준제기 낭샤 상당고도 제부 간대지 용마용 세디 주의 신왕진인바 주진 간대지 초마초왕긴 제부 용마용 들이마도 주진라 마뒤바치시네 제부 용한 요마래 세상 제부든 뒤메베 있나 주는 좋다이래 제부든 뒤유에 있나 이 주도야래 디 추니래 랑신 추니긴 주당래 디지 상당고 세상 인상 rāng lā guibā chīn yī guibē tuyandā tī rūshē kī jū kāchū tsāng mā chī tū tū jū rū chī chī nē rūyā jū ngā rū tū na tī lā pāpiñ chē bā yung rī jū tāmbā rū tū na tī lā pāpiñ chē bā chī yung rī jū jā tāmbā chī rū tū bā yī na tī lā pāpiñ chē bā chī yung rī rūwa jū chā tsāng wā rū tū na tī lā pāpiñ chē bā chā tsāng yung rī jū kāshē mā tū rū mā tū na tī lā pāpiñ chē bā kāshē mā tū yung mā tī chū nī yī bā chī rāngshīn chū nī yī bā chī 세상 랑라 구이바지 유바이나 시다 구이바단 되바세디 카가로 다 랑라 구이바스는 빼는 가수 수부디 추구월에 수부추월라 세구월 디 무에네스루 구이바레 시다 구이베 된디 두야라 구 주창마치시 두야 디지부레 딜레 파베 생기 나로라 아 나라 지구구도 니구구도 송구구도 시신 되바 공니 컴퓨터 동야다 센제 제디기 제바 연구요 말 senje jewe digin jewe yungu maro dadi ku jajue rangi tuni jewe di yungu jigu gore kale jen lega chini jawa ki tuni jewe yungu jere mato ndoba chimbu jine jewe yungu yo maro es chinsuan ndoba ji san nanglo di ne kuni di nga kewa chimbu cha gugudu nga jiji che gugudu nga jiji cha gugudu si ro nga jeka ki pimbu che gugudu si di ne dewa ina senalon 되버 진짜부지 레베이나레 제부디 용거베 용거 말해 단 제부 용해도 가르치고 있으나 자와 중국 세상 자와 가수 중도는 딜러바빈 제부 용거리 디장리스 단 루당 디지부리다 루당 디장리 친선 디장리세 디장 제부디 용구여베이나 딜러바비 주 가수 주베이나 디 자와디 자주 깔래젠 다现在第一章준제기 루당디 상시 당
So on top of that, there's another thing we can think about causes and their results, or cause and effect. So recognizing that whatever effect or result that there is, they all come about through under the power of their own causes. So they all come about through their own causes. They depend upon causes and conditions. This is just the nature of this law of causality, of causes and their effects. So we have to think, if we need something, we have to check what are the causes and conditions that are going to bring that about. Right? And so if I can assemble one of the causes, then maybe you get a certain level of result, or 5 of the causes, or if you bring together the things that you want or need, if you bring together 10 or 100 of the different causes and conditions, if you assemble all them, then you'll get the corresponding results to that. If you have one cause and maybe it's not complete, won't bring the effect, or if there's 5 causes, it will bring a certain level of the result. So you need to recognize that the effects that or results that we experience depend upon their causes, and we need to assemble those causes. So we have to also recognize that there's a difference between wanting and needing, right? The things that we want and the things that we need. With regard to the things that we need, like in order to survive, we need food, right? So we need to put effort in to get the food. But then on top of that, we might have all these wants on top of our basic needs. And then we can spend a lot of time worrying about, if only I had that, and I need this, and worrying about the things that we want. But worrying about them, overthinking about them like that, but getting anxious about them won't bring the result, will it? If we want to bring about the result, we need to act, we need to do something, we need to assemble together the causes that will bring about that result. So only by wishing for something, that's not going to make something happen, right? Again, Rinpoche is emphasizing we need to do something about it. We need to act, put in the effort to bring it about. So assembling the different causes and conditions that will bring about the result, because that's just the nature of things. The nature, if we want a result, it naturally depends upon its causes and conditions.
시상 다 딘데기 준데기 두단 상당 용디간라 강에 가르치 채워 있나야 랑신바 임바. 로 수수라 나살로 수비 딘데 강에 가르치 채워 있나야 랑신바 임바. 춘이 임바. 딘데 시상 코인 거. 디코 디양 아니 나사 나야디고 랑신바레 준 주진 나사 나야기 주진 라만던 종치진에 아니 제부 나사디 용구여버디 춘이 레스 다디고 랑신 레스. 로 디상당인데 디양 심바 마르르 차야드 핑기르.
So likewise, if we experience an illness or a sickness, if we can think that's the nature, it's just natural that I get an illness because it's the result of past causes and conditions that have brought it about, right? So if we're able to think like that, then it can help us keep a relaxed mind when we encounter or experience different illnesses and things, recognizing that it's just the nature of things that I'm experiencing this sickness now because that's the result of past causes and conditions that have brought it about now.
시상 다 디인상 예이 강라 마소기 자유기 두자 순데디 마소라 내당 간제지나 송바 있네야 내당 야부지는 여바 있네야 지부 내당 두자지는 여바 있네야 스모 마투부지 흘려지 대라 아니 상동야디 다기 강라 쉬야기 미다베랑신 임바 아니 다나신기 가수리 된진니버디 가래 탄제로라지 리베 차당 밀리베 차니가 여바 핀베 차당 뉴베 차니가 여바 아니 다나신 창마로베 로 제보상이 창마로베 준제기랑신 로 주던 제비기 디긴 주당기 토니 용디기 여바 아니 강에 간데지 채워 있나야 랑신바 임바 아니 수수의 구베 수수기 단대 내당디 조당 동야기 그거 가뒤이네 여바 단대기 내당 주여바 있나 내당 문제베 내당 지당 단 문제베 내당 슬로고르베다 강야기 내당 주여바 있나야 딘조 동야기 그거디 가뒤이네 여바 가뒤이네 야부차 여바 야부차 여바 그거 여바 딘제기 디가자 디지젠 다기 강디 된다 계시무지디 아니 디오용다 마요세디 슈르기 유기 진지 많이 봐 수수 상동당기 토네 디제 용구여 봐 디시 디주제디 시도나 디주제디 상당도나 딘딘 핑그레 상도.
Okay, so if we summarize and look what we've looked at already, if we're able to recognize if we can bring these ways of thinking to our different experiences that we have, if we recognize then that all things are impermanent in nature, so recognizing, this this quality of like changing moment to moment, just not lasting, this impermanent nature. And if we're able to recognize, at the start, it's like whatever experiences that we encounter, whether they're good experiences or bad experiences, whatever situation we're in, if it's a positive situation or a negative situation, if we can draw on these ways of thinking, it will really help us. So recognizing that that situation is impermanent in nature, it's changing, it won't last, and recognizing that whatever situation we encounter, there is good in it, and there is, there's something positive to take from it. They have qualities and negativity, qualities and faults. We can have this balanced mind to recognize that it's true in every situation. There's a positive side and a negative side within that, right? And then also the third, so looking at that everything has its qualities and its faults. It's the second one. The first one, the impermanent nature. The third thing that we can reflect on is that whatever result that we experience, that recognizing that that's just in the nature of causality, the nature of causes and their effects. Yeah, when the causes and conditions come together, then the effect will come. And so if we're able to think like that, it's going to help us keep our mind stable in that situation when we meet it. And then the fourth thing to think of is that whatever we encounter, there's always an opportunity to change any situation. So when we meet with what's like a problem or a difficult situation, we can recognize that it's possible that it can become a good situation. It's possible for the situation to change. So we can see that depending on our attitude as well, there's always an opportunity to change a situation. And then the fifth point to consider that can really help us is whether something comes or not, whether something happens or not, does not depend on the thing itself, on the object itself. It depends upon on our minds, the way that we engage with that object, that thing, whether it's going to benefit us or not, right? And so if we're able to draw on all these different ways of thinking, then this can really help us, help our attitudes, our minds. Yeah.
단동 배춘선들이 지시 지슈이나 마주 나중 jaladi rasuna rane ngala diji jongso jaladi meba chane ngala dunghe jongso kanghe jong sangsang jindabuji nawo shadi yoro asu dindeji tendi yoro da ngwe ne sula jaladi yoba chane susul dio yong yo mare dio cho dio dile yo mare jaladi meba chane susul cho dunghe dile yo mare 다 초디오도 둥에디 가리왕기 레요스나 잘라딜라 뇌바티 지요다 뇌샤는 드림도 뇌샤디 지요다 슈진이 뇌샤기 뇌샤기 지디오 슈다 망부지 뇌샤기 지디 다 망부스라고 그래 다 나란소도 배진 뇌샤는 드림도 뇌샤기 다 패시오다 뇌샤기 지디고 가래 러디가라 jaladire다 당연히 아이패드 jalai 다 주셔 야부지나 아들 시라 가부여이나 니 신자여이나 jaladi 차수나 미지 자수나 나롱만 그러 마가오 차그러 로 다디 나롱라에데 가르스나 나 jaladi라 신자여이자 레마도 아이패드 자비 주sen지 말해 아이패드 자비 주sen 디장지 말해 로 멤베 주생 가르스나 pen 미신다지 아이베트 자바이나 수수 신자 메킹기 아이베트 자바이나 디 쿤블랑금도 수수는 되바 요사기 자라지 자나 마가오 연구도 마지와 연구도 되바 메사기 되바 민되베 자라지 자나 디 마가오 연구면도 마지와 연구면도 그래서 디 되바 요면도 투디도디 세우 차소 clear 이니 센나라 딜라 생기나 수수 생기나로 딜라 되바다 민되바 유메 디기 심바지마지 수구도마도 잘라 차마제 수마소다 잘라 차마제 지부기 수구여이나 되베 아이베트 차네야 가서 그래 마지와 용구래 민되베 아이베트 차네야 마지와 용구래 민되베 아이베트 차바이나 단도 가부지기로 그 두자 나고 가우면 그기 아이베트 자로 지서 나 가스기로 디라 말아 제가 네바랑이 지기여버디 세부도스 네바랑의 카툰 되어여버디
So if we get something that we want, we think that makes us happy, and if we don't get something or if we get something we don't want, we feel like that's bringing us suffering, right? So we feel like it's coming from the object or the thing but actually, in reality, it's nothing to do with the object itself, the thing itself, whether or not we feel happy or sad or experience feel happiness or feel unhappy about it. Because what it really comes down to is actually, it's not just this wanting, it's this, in the scriptures is taught that this is attachment, this desirous attachment, or this clinging attachment that we have to our things. Okay, so Rinpoche gave an example of, he has an iPad on his table here, and it said, if it's a really good quality iPad and he really likes it, if there's this, if you have this clinging attachment to it, then if someone else comes along and breaks it, then you might get angry at them. He said you'll get angry at them, or you'd be unhappy about it, right? But it's not coming from the iPad itself. It's coming from having this clinging attachment to the iPad. If it was coming from the iPad itself, then it should be that if someone broke somebody else's who you don't like, if they had an iPad and then someone broke that, then we should also feel unhappy for that. But actually we can feel, oh good, I'm glad that they broke their iPad because I didn't like them anyway, I hope they do break it. So if it was coming from the object itself, the iPad, then whichever iPad broke, then we should feel unhappy about it, right? But actually it's coming from it depends on whether we have this clinging attachment to the object or not, to the thing or not, right? We have this clinging attachment to my iPad, so then when my iPad gets broken by then we get upset. If someone else breaks it, we get angry at them. But if someone else's iPad breaks, it doesn't affect us. Why? Because we don't have this clinging attachment to someone else's iPad, right? So this is a really clear example of how it's not coming from the object, whether we experience a pleasant or unhappy feeling, right? It's dependent on, it comes from our clinging attachment to the object.
디 세부차소 뇌베 수술은 뇌버예베 아이베르 차나 마가오지 수술은 뇌버메바 민뇌베 가부메베 아이베르 차나 마지버게 용음도스 디지불라다 디지불라다.
So if it's an object, your iPad that you have this clinging attachment to, and it gets broken, then we're unhappy, right? But if someone else, if another iPad that we don't have this clinging attachment to breaks, then we don't experience the unhappiness about that, do we?
세상 디 지부 용마용 세디 ngasu 단내 ngaran수 지부 용마용 세디리다. 그러 ngaran수 지부 용마용 세디 ngaran수 세나는 되버 예메다. 카톨 주던 제비긴 되어 예버디 세브리도.
So for ourselves, whether we experience happiness or not, it depends upon whether or if we have this pleasant experience or not with these things. It depends on whether we have this desire for those things or not, right? It really shows this link of causality, the cause and effect relationship between them, doesn't it? Like if we have the clinging for the thing or desire for the thing, and then we experience the happiness with that thing, really.
단도 배선지 슈니투스. 근데 지난주 나중도 스티어티웨이나 전강나 루주 담바 대고스나. 나중 미마치 때 디미스그로. 전강나 대고는 백갈레리 두녀리스 디팅그로. 딩레팅 마리스.
So I'm going to ask you something. How would you all feel like if I asked anyone, would you like, how about spending 10 days in a prison?
10 days.
Would anyone want to do that?
엄마, 가줄래?
나? 님이 추.
루주.
건나, 루주.
면 루주. 칸 니마주 칸다.
10 years. I have to clean my ears, sorry. So if I was to say to you, how about spending 10 years in a prison? Would any of you be up for it? Would any of you want to do it? Probably most of us would say we wouldn't want to do it. Would any of you want to do it?
Yeah. 다 수진 되어요 말아. 되어 매서 쯧는 침버 있는 쯧는 루디간 답에 마지막 시고 용으로.
So none of us would want to do it, right? So if we were dragged to go to the prison, then we would go unhappily, wouldn't we? We wouldn't feel happy about it.
다디 마인바지 양 가서 우리 강사 미세들이 강사 체벌진들이 슬라고래. 슐로르 데바이나 슐려지 잔니 데 말아버지로 딘데기 슐려지시니 데기 국어 미라 지라 가사 미라킨 다 수수지부 딘데 공전이 되고 상긴 딘데기 미치요이나 구선 수수지부 공전이 되고 상긴기 딘데기 미치요이나 다 디츠는 주나 루치담을 전 주웨이나 로 당이 나 공제 국어디 총송산 그 가부지신 주로 아니 지부도 지로 팅팅들이 대 가서 배전 요래 디 딘데기 미치라 전에 대 지부 용식으로.
So there could be someone who's not really happy in the outer world and the way things are, and they've really got a strong wish to go into a long-term, like to go and meditate for a long time. So for someone like them, if they had the opportunity to go into the prison for 10 years, they think, oh, now I'd have the chance to do this long meditation. So it's possible for someone like them to go with a happy mind, isn't it?
야, 슐로.
This is an example.
야, 슐로 전강기 슐로 가서 나신지 대바이나. 소了네가 친구 여행이 미드네이나. 다 민용자 마부지. 미신다기 지 세베 네가 되는 여행이나. 로. 미신다 용의 세베 네가 친구들의 여행이나. 네가 친구지 쿠란 세나고 니 보나야. 미신다기 쿠란을 네가 제미 용산 되기 니 고마투베 강에 여행이 미진이나. 쿠란 전에 주소나. 다다 중상그러. 다가 전에 미 송제지기 마고지. 쿠란 신용으로 되네 용축으로.
It's also possible, isn't it, that if there was like among a group of people, if there was this danger that someone was going to come along and kill someone in this group of people, then if you knew that there was someone out to get you and potentially they're going to come and kill you, then even at night you wouldn't be able to sleep and you'd be really worried about it, right? And then you thought, if you had this opportunity, if that person had the opportunity to go into prison to safety for 10 years, they think, oh, actually that would be quite all right. They'd be scared for their life and then think, oh, it'd be okay to go there for 10 years, wouldn't they?
现在电影上基不用的嘛，有些的上东的其他类的是。
So therefore, whether we get happiness or not, for happiness to come or not, it really depends on the way we think, doesn't it?
但电影上上节中的这个我让出了超对我永远当，对我永远就做这样修罗的要嘛的，叔叔生了要的是，这当个对我因那的，你超对我因那做叔叔上当当的这样有，叔叔生讲的，上当当个当当去托年超对我的如果因那一路的准备，南生了准备。 对我主当的主席为呢，的好像给定不了的是，但是呢，学就目不了啥来给我们了。
So Lord Buddha explained how for our happiness to come, and like if we're able to develop that happiness within our own mind about this attitude of, if we're able to cultivate this attitude, then we're able to bring about our own happiness. And so the Lord Buddha taught that our happiness doesn't come from the external things, but it comes from our way of thinking. And if we're able to establish our own happiness through our own way of thinking, then that happiness becomes very stable. This is what the Buddha taught. It becomes very stable happiness because it's not dependent upon the external conditions that we meet with.
其实在今天印象，我让去多年也不进我这土国的，多年适当的。 야부지 하고 구교래 디워 야부지 문제 투고래 디워 조당디 야부지 문제 투고래 그래서 근데 인상 상제 중된 대기 덴버시기 나로라 당부디 딘 동해 밥에 덴버 시지네 동해 당부 못지세디 딘버래 다 딘데기 동해디 자원이 매버 수여요래 디 주진기 왕기 용교래 시지네 군준 덴버송 아니 군준 덴버디 레니니 디제 동해 지지기 주 사제기 레당 디 군의 농지기 녀모번 니부티제 디니 니부디야 매버 수여요리 가르스나 녀모신 단제기 자오디 다든 셈버세디 신지로기 로레 디세베 세바 고딘 스미디 요레 시지네 단지 세베 세바 고딘 요바디 송지지니 고베 데마디 수 디투제기 타우수 랑라버 송지 쳔베 랑라버 송지 뒤베 아니 랑지 뎀바 다메 도베 시라 송지지 로 랑 다음에 무슨도 통이 shiro ishi o di song shi ne da demba shi do si song res.
So we need to know what suffering is, we need to be able to recognize what suffering is, and we need to know how to overcome suffering. And we also need to be able to identify what happiness is and how to bring about that happiness. So therefore, the Buddha first taught the truth of suffering. So the Buddha taught these four truths, or the four truths for Arya beings. So the Buddha first taught this truth of suffering. And then where does that suffering comes from? It comes from the truth of origin, the second truth. And that true origin is karma and afflictions. And all of the afflictions that arise in our mind, they all are rooted in this self-grasping ignorance. And this self-grasping is a wrong consciousness. It sees things in a contradictory way to think how they actually exist. And so it's possible to abandon that wrong consciousness of self-grasping ignorance. And the abandonment that has abandoned the self-grasping ignorance, which is the root of all our other afflictions and suffering, is the true cessation, which is the third truth. And then the way or the method to bring about that abandonment that has abandoned the self-grasping ignorance is to train in the true path, which is the training of the three higher trainings, which is all to do with cultivating the wisdom, realizing selflessness. And this is the method, the true path for bringing about the true cessation. So in this way, the Buddha presented the four truths of an Arya being.
다 저유는 송로는 게 지난주 같이 구유면 시기미도 얘기제디야 가서 우리 야지시 마지시 니순이 차수 다 저유는 송로는.
So if any of you have any questions, I invite you to ask any questions. Hang on a second, because I'm not sure what you've taken from this, what you've understood from it. I've been speaking about things here and there, so we directly. We have a question right here.
Okay, loud.
Thank you, Mr. Yangten, for giving me the opportunity to ask you. And actually, we had a very good class, and our study is going to end. And many questions you answered today, you got it in mind already, and you just confirmed their existence. They are very important. My question is other. People suffer not only because of skin disease or iPod is wrong. You translate or?
After you make the whole question.
Okay. And for example, me, my papa is from Ukraine and my mama is from Russia. And I'm suffering because of this bloody war is existing. So I don't know how you call it, and I cannot do anything to stop it. And me personally, I help refugees in Berlin railway station to help refugees from Ukraine to take, and I've seen the suffering from them. I have two questions because I want to level up our discussion. We are in the 21st century, and I don't know. So it seems to be we are in the beginning of big war could happen. This is why I would like to ask top management of Buddhism what Dalai Lama and the team are doing to prevent the world from the wars, from this particular war and from the wars in future. And what should I, as a small human, do to prevent other people avoid this kind of suffering? Thank you.
Thank you. 저기 차상 야부 고마스 도도지 son다가.
맞습니다.
그런데 유크레인다 나가서 러시아기 뒤부 파만이 부이. 그런 거 강연 체에 가는 있어 조디.
강연체디 공이티와디
막 주기 돈이 강연 체.
제 차상디 유크레인다 러시아 우르스기 마마세디 마 체르체르디 삼블링디 마숨바다오 용다오스 용 인사레 통기도 아니 공이티와디레디 남베 케왕 페나 갈로임셰다 년데임셰초 the 남베 케왕 만보기 탑시 카레 난기도 데마 냠베 야나마 카페 체드 탑시 카레 난기도 디 티오칙 아니 니바디 Korang dao, mi chung dao, naso dao, naso tapshi kariche gore, dide, dirupson dire.
Also. 다 Jiao yin xin no yu, da du da du, da gu zi gang bu la, mi zi cha zang, gu zi gang bu si na jing do, gu zi cha zang la, da shi di se di, ha le be ke jing bu re es, da shi di se di sen ni yong gu re es, ni xiang zi se di, shi di xiang zi dan zhe yo re es, xiang zi, jiang ba de zi wo kan bei xuan. 相似的这有的是，你米日的，去年是哪个来的？米日的确的点被俺呢，米日的确的点被俺呢，错了，那完了，第一，他说 best， 第一早到不的，相似的是。 是吧？相似的意思。的确主要的就做点相似的意思。俺让出米人汤的是哪个嘞？米人汤是哪个呢 ？value human beings value 是吧？米人汤的样相似的意思。就像난 생각 리벌 때문에 신연디 잠블리기 신연기 나로라야 쪼구도 잠블리기 신연이야 쪼구도 단단 잠블리기 제지기 신연기 디생기 나로라 로터카 나로라 아니 생종들 제기 로단다 나랑수 미지기 디제기 조디 삼바상부지도 투디여 삼바상부디 배가수 소나신 임바디 디 로수자케 로다 나로라 지당 차니 매베 숨시로. 그래서 신연기 돈에 신연 제당기 돈에 잠블린 조당고도 시. 디베 가서 그래 부장신 부지기 돈에 자친 부지기 돈에 잠블리라 만투 마요에 제 더신나요 그랬어. 다른 부지니베 가서 우리 자친 부지기 돈에 만투 명어 제기 더시 나요 그랬어. 미지지 강에티 강에 수켄디 미래 수켄디 미인자 강에 매버 수켄디야 미기 제고 그랬어 미기 수배 강에디 미기 매버 수도 그랬어 디야 계시시네 나좀 미랬어 나좀 미인자 강에 체디 다이얼로그 지네 아니 주센 당시 뭐에네 수 가르를 때네 뭐에네 수도 튠베 탈랑 베제 땅에 매버 수고를 마도 둔두 나시 둔두 시기와 둔두 둔두스나 애님 둔두기 강에 체디 가르치기래 다이얼로그 제요 말 다이얼로그 제면서 둔두기 가르치기래 강에 체디 자린 잡았다 자린 자야마도 더 쉬워 말 그래서 디 둔두기 제당을 했지 다 둔두 제당을 했어 렌다우래 간다 남주 비제 당에 아니 디제 오래 했지네 야오름 지기베 미지지라 다시 뒤땅을 오랬다 면 뒤순다.
So thank you for your question, and the responses from His Holiness the Dalai Lama always, actually for his whole life, has been saying again and again and explaining again and again how our peace and happiness is extremely important, and how our happiness and peace comes from our within, from our minds, and that our peace and happiness is related with love and compassion. And so His Holiness says that for people to live in peace and happiness, we need love and compassion. His Holiness has been saying this for his whole life, teaching this for his whole life, and saying that the main source of our happiness is love and compassion. And the human value, what makes a human valuable, what's the value of a human, is our love and our compassion. Love and compassion, Dharamsala. And so So what His Holiness has been trying to promote and establish for many, many years, a long, long time, is that along with general education, we need to have education of the mind, education of the heart. So that this needs to go together with the general education. And so that in schools and the education systems, they need to change to bring in this education of love and compassion. So this is being established and has been, for a long, long time. His Holiness has not only been saying about it, but actively bringing this education of the heart into the general education. And so this is His Holiness's long-term vision and his big vision, and as a way to avoid wars, getting directly to your point. And so His Holiness has said again and again that the humans are the causes of these problems, so the humans can be the ones to overcome those problems. How? Because another quality of our being human is that we can engage in dialogue. Right? When we engage in the fighting, then we're nothing different like animals. The animals, when they confront a difficult situation, they fight. They don't discuss and resolve things with dialogue. They fight. But we as humans we're able to engage in dialogue. And so in this way, His Holiness has been working extensively his whole life to try and promote love and compassion and trying to bring that education of the heart into our general education system in order to prevent wars, in order to bring about the peace and happiness of humanity.
Nambagi Tadang Kante Yorsina Mantula Namba Sanjebe Mantula Tadang Kante Yores Shuina Mantu Jane Kange Meva Sugin Siwaro Di Sutu Mare Escorta Tsewagi Tsewa Yi Tsewa Meva Sutu Maris Tsegi Tsewa Meva Sutu Maris Tsewa Meva di Sursna Shanzi Shidi Tsewa Meva Sutu Res Shizan Xie Talang Hakuya Xie Talang Takandela Guru Shiwa Tsewa da Shiwa Tseme Shiwa
Tsewa's in violence, the hatred.
Tsewagi Dushu de Kare Tsewagi opposite Odi no
Tseme Hakas.
Shiwagi Tsewa Meva Sutugures Tseme Shiwagi Tsewa Meva Sutugures This
Non-violent.
Ani Masebe Tsewa dan Tsewa Meve Taulani Druina Competition Re Druina Tsewa Meve Taulandi Halebe Kasure Nubachi Yores Daddy Nambe Tadamaris. So Nambe Jiungi Tadan Tinedachi.
And so then if we ask what's the Buddhist perspective on war, then in general we think that through war we might bring about a resolution or a solution, right? But actually from the Buddhist perspective, that's so not in line with reality. The war cannot bring about a resolution. And from the Buddhist perspective, hatred can never overcome hatred. Only love and compassion can overcome hatred. And so when we look at violence, violence cannot be overcome with more violence. Actually, non-violence is the way to overcome violence. And actually when we when we draw on non-violence to overcome violence, it's actually the most powerful way to overcome violence.
다 유크레인다 러시아기 마투 차츠나 디 롬바니기 강에 지부 마레스 딘 잠블리기 강에레스 디베 된 잠블리 미참마기 디 상당고에 된다레 상도스다 나랑게.
And so Rinpoche's thought is that the war between Ukraine and Russia is not just between Ukraine and Russia. It's not just the problem of Ukraine and Russia. It's actually a problem of the whole world. And the whole world should be looking at ways to overcome it. Yeah, it affects all of us. And it's a responsibility of all of us. Again, responsibility.
That 미 수수수기 가르치에요 슬라우니가나 수수를 바베 근데 친상디 수수기 제거 춘중들어 지랑기 제거디 country 래 제거스나 수수 친상디 수수기 제거 춘중들어
그나 최장 그런 기억하거든. 최장.
친상 family
알레. 김상 건다.
친상디 수수기 제거 춘중들었어 지랑기 제거디 제거 친구들어 다 녜네 미치네 니네 시네 주주네 자담부 도시야 누구로 가서다 내가 야부인바이나 미치제 아니 니 미니버디의 수진테 디네 미시제 주 아니 주주 자담부 도시야 누구로 되게 그래서 저랑 치라 아니 같이 두두기 가서 오다 군소라 지 수술의 바비 푸 인지무토네 잠블리의 펜바 수술 롱발의 펜바 디 가르치에도 인지무토네 펜바디 수술 리숑 다고자야다 아니 다나신기 다 공도 쉬워나신 맞아 미신비 차네 마란솔의 개치슈디 디제의 데마체디레스지네 진대기 가서 올다 잠빌로자다 인진부 핀도 유디베 수수 미리기 리숑다 아니 로자 디수제디 파도 답이당바이나 디토니지 핀도 용도 가버렸어.
And then if we look for on a personal level, like what we can do as individuals, then if we think one's own family is like one's own country, isn't it? It's like as our own small little country, our own small little world, and so in a way when we engage in anything, we rely on 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like more and more people, and whatever we do, and it affects these people around us, right? And so Rinpoche is saying that if we are able to look after our own culture, if we're able to think long term, think what can I do to help to contribute towards overcoming this war, what can I do to contribute long term towards bringing more peace and happiness here and in this world, then you can, if you spend your life thinking like whatever good is in the culture, to preserve that, to try and preserve what is good in the culture, what is positive, then sort of dedicating our time and our life to be able to preserve in those things and looking after those things and upholding those things, then that is going to bring benefit, and so that's what would be worthwhile to do.
다가는 잠블리 침부시우스게 말해 지제는 잠블리 지마도 요 말해 나랑솔라 나주 베제 동 토야기 잠블리 지마도 요 말어 단 잠블리 디낭로라 미카치 지우지네 디 미카치 동해뇽네 데세디 저메버치시네 카가치 데세디 요 말해 뒤쪽가시지 제버를 마도 다른 얘기 강에디 산이 체랑기 강에 로 다리 체랑기 강에디 산이 얘기 강에 딘다고 지래다.
And so this world that we live in, it's not a big world, is it? It's a small world that we're all sharing as our home, and so it's not that whatever happens here doesn't affect over there. It's not that there's some people over there that are happy and some people over there that are unhappy. Actually, it's all just a matter of time. If I'm experiencing a problem today, maybe it's your problem tomorrow. If you're experiencing a problem today, maybe it's my problem tomorrow. So this world is small, and the things that happen in it, it's not like isolated. Whatever happens to one now can be happening to another at a different time. So we necessarily need to know that.
I want to ask, how important do you think improving my focus is? Before I start to work or meditate on my acceptance of everything as it is. So, how important is improving my focus and learning to be more in focus and versus acceptance of all as is. Of course, both of them are important, but I want to hear your opinion on this.
loud. Almost I understand. Diris. Lega Karchewa inere, Manegi inere, Yalangi inere, Kadu inaya, Chimbatin Guris, Chimbatemba. Ngendichi o Shuba Yalani, Tanga Yalangu, Nga Yalani, Ngela, and Gare. The Chan Navaina, Ngela Shatse. The Shatse Sanning, Suchuin, Dumbotri. The Dinang Lega, Gutsuin, Lega, Chusu Govalanga Lekondu, Legandi, Nigunja Legandi, Gonda Legandi, Sama, Senalola, Shagunchi, Shagun. Did any Drushin Begalo, Nadana Lekon and USC, Timber Dingy, Tosiana, Timbala Jundar Tigre, the Shrapindo Yor, Nimatawa Tijetu na Timber Yard Duor. Any sounds on to show you, Luchi in Angola, Dundra needs. Dinde Jondan Dawjis in a missay sound in the Devina, Pinto Yoris.
Dunda Chigni and the Dao.
Chini Yan and Dawji.
So Rinpoche understood your question, and so what's really important, like when we're laying down, or whether we're getting up when we're laying down to sleep, or getting up in the morning, or when we're off to go to work, then it's really important to apply what we call mindfulness these days. And as Rinpoche's gone on to explain it, it's this being aware of being aware. So this mindfulness. So when being aware when we're waking up, or being mindful of getting up, and if we're Buddhist, then we offer the prostrations, and then we go to wash our face, and we be aware that we're prostrating, be aware that we're washing our face, and then we go off to do our work, whatever it is. So being aware of whatever we're doing is known as like a glance meditation. So it's like this, analytical glance meditation of being aware of as we're going through our day. And so if we're able to train like this, it's really beneficial for us if we're able to train like this on a day-to-day basis. And then on top of that, sometimes if we're able to, in 1 year, like for a week or two or a month or two, to stay in some retreat, that would be really good for us.
Thank you. So my question is about getting conviction in the path. And how do you get correct conviction in the path, and at what point? And how should you have motivation to continue practicing until you have this conviction? And how should you have this motivation to continue practicing until you have conviction in the path? Because I heard some teachings, and it makes sense to me that self-grasping ignorance is the cause of suffering, and if we develop opposite mind of wisdom of emptiness of inherent existence, then this self-grasping will stop and all the suffering will stop. But I have doubts about it, and I'm wondering, at what point do you have conviction in it? Do you get it only when you have direct experience of seeing, or when you have a correct understanding? And until you have this exact, unshakable conviction, how should you have a conviction to be practicing? So it's quite a difficult path, and other things you should be doing instead. And if this path doesn't work, then why put effort into it? Thank you.
Litin Teodotos the lam sasasigi lamkala the nambe lampala the sechik to kare ngepa the imbare tacheba the sasala yichik the kanga kare the yiche yana depa sumra the sumbati the nguni the in tacheba the conviction segre the Katu yongire, the sasasagi nambe lamka, the yangdaba yimba, the ngune yimba, the ngune sasat, the nyepa, semingepa, tacheba, katu yongire, kandi yongire, and idima yongi badu, kandi the nem kare, the nyam selembala kulong, kandi nyetukire, and the kangla kung the dagzin, the koitso, dunyogi. So tsawa yemba hakugire, ani dame to be shed up the nyempo yemba hakugire, the nyempo yensang dunyagi sebe tab yemba hakugire de tadung la dopa yure, tetsum yure, chetsandi tetsun seada, kandi yongire, the dame musudopa matok badu, the tachetuki maybe yana the hako samgi digirebe tindida tilop something.
야오시 하고 마서 다 니버니에디라 니르와 니리 당부 니버니에디 상종기 니버니버세들 상종기 니버니에디 동도 취바 상종기 니버니에디라 로 지도 티베탄의 리버시 니다의 수신저大年 상진의的上的行为难就路提送去不就算的他短大的日本西姑娘都真的日本养大的几百斤呢变呢俺说当的咱们大不的谁那样们那卡索的去当的大面不的谁说了大面不看的是大面不因为举行卡的是举行的几百斤呢但举行养大痛呢但举行定手不痛呢但这加热下上举行养大不记了定呢被他去不去被生给难路了马地我找你没有去他让热下是被米地我马地我当多把的定的找你没被拖呢被叔叔给被他借用的个呢他让热下是被举行养大不的定呢他举行了当不接不接了看举行个啥dindeji insan di ingudu sibe be susu gi be kaso re ta dindeji maje rangje sunshi ta di ingudu sambe dindegi be riba yangda la de ni wa dangbo di ni di gang la jiba gi ni wa ni bas ta sangyong gi ni wa dangbo di ni go ta ni wa di ni go ta di ti song di zu yo ma re ti song chue sa ta di sangyong gi jiba gi ni wa ni be tuen di ta da me ba yin ba shi sa ha gu sa re ta ha gu ye tuen da me ba di la 다음에 벌 생샤네 다 강야 매바 매가 동상 가자 다 가상지 매가 동상 딘데기 동바 참무딜라 생샤네 시내공 하동공 시라송지기 띵인지지 디모트네 공네 난시기지 다음에 벌세디 공송도 통니 아주 미 라베지 무통하나시 문소도 배 통용디가 아니 시니 문송기 니바들 다디 니바 탈도버티 니고
So it's it's through contemplating. There's like these four ascertainments. The Rinpoche explained the first two. So basically what it comes down to is thinking about correct, valid reasons. So thinking about all the reasoning that for something, like there's like the Buddha taught that all phenomena are selfless. So then thinking about all the valid reasons, and once you see that there is a valid reason or a correct reason, to then think deeply about it. And so when you think deeply about it, so much so that you get this real certainty that it's just like that, and this is how it is, and therefore I need to do this, I must do this. So in coming to understand how that thing is, then you develop this certainty that that's how it is, and I need to do that. And so then the way to go about that is through relying on correct reasons. Then you develop a valid inference, which is a conceptual realization. So based on reasoning, we develop this valid inference, and this is the first of the ascertainments, the valid inference. And then once you have the valid inference based on valid inference realizing selflessness, then you need to think and meditate on that again and again and again, so that you develop the calm abiding focused on selflessness. And then more and more so that you develop the union of calm abiding and special insight focused on selflessness. And then when you meditate on that, you familiarize with that more and more and more, then it becomes, you have this direct seeing or this perceptual realization of selflessness, which is like being able to see it in the palm of your hand, like you can see it directly, clearly. And that is the second type of ascertainment, this direct perception. So they're the stages for, it's basically having to develop these ascertainments through correct reasons and then familiarize them with them to develop a conceptual realization onto a direct realization.
Just a little bit clear.
I still have doubts because this is very difficult to achieve. Like it's very difficult to achieve a first ascertainment and even more difficult to achieve a second ascertainment. So when do you have conviction that this will work? You should put effort to do it.
Na tatun petsun ye kain sena ngepa tambo pe khali khabo dele we kyang nepa nipa di musundu doya dele we kyang khali khabo hinsang kande di ngune yimba.
다 디로 티송 유베글라 다 신주 지오다.
So at the time where you have the doubts, you need to analyze, investigate. That's the time to analyze and investigate.
모든이 신주 지오.
Yeah, you need to continuously do that.
베는 단데 다음에 버이나 다 매당 간데리. 다음에 버디 상제 중린데기 송버 장레베 쿨로 주천 요래. 주천 매나 상제기 송인 버이나야 공다쉐로. 시상 구선.
그래도 타마 나도 해밀로.
주천 매버이나 상제기 송인 공다쉐로.
말해라래.
주천 유메 다 매당 간데리. 다음에 세기 매주기 다디 간다고 지르시. 단도 비자모 우미 기 비자망부때 제보 망부치 상로 망부당.
So we need to analyze and investigate a lot. So there's this thing we're told that the self is selfless. So in what way is the self selfless? And what reasons are there to show or explain how self is selfless? What did the Buddha teach about selflessness? And then look what reasons the Buddha presented for selflessness. And if you find that it's not reasonable, then you say, sorry, Buddha, and you can leave it to one side. You don't have to take it up. But what you need to do is engage in this analysis, investigation to analyze the self and how it exists. What is the selflessness? What are the reasons for the person being selfless? And then Rinpoche's advice to you is that through the middle way scriptures, the middle way texts that explain all the different reasoning for selflessness, you need to study those, to familiarize with those, and analyze and investigate the middle way scriptures.
Okay.
So my question is, I perfectly understand the fact that we cannot influence external conditions to make them as we like. So my question is, how to develop such a mind? What are the most important steps to be made in order for us to develop such a mind which is not affected by those changing external conditions?
야부지 구마스 치치.
시기켄 소시다 기로당 투기민도와 스스셈 기로당마도 아니 스스셈 기로당기 림밤시 순사 이니양 디 소체셔 가리레 아니 스스셈 기로당야기 탑람 가리레 순서
생조 동야기 더시디 조조디 무연내주 통배 싫어디 지고 무연내주 가르레스 무연내주 통배 루 싫어디 지고 무연내주라 단다디로 수수기 다 가르스라 그래 수수기 디제 모마디 간에 연구도스 이쯤 버줘라 만지기도 상바다 아니 다 나신 게 세나라 수수기 생긴 되버줘라 일을 태봐 뒤에 야구래 딘데기베 상무 딜르티네 센의 디제디 연구도베 잘라마뇽기 토네 디제 연구도 딩연의 제버지 다 잘라마뇽기 토네 무마뇽기 토네 디제 연구 디 연구여버이나 아니 나도 무마고 수에르마도 터지신다 요마다 아니 무맹이즈 니지 가디오 있는 동에 아니 무여긴스 가디오 있는 디오 데마세티 디에 제미도 무에네스 디 제미도 그래서 내가 무에네스디 가르레스 디 니버니 구두스 세부차선
So Rinpoche said the way to go about it is to be realistic, to look at how things actually are, to see things in line with reality, and to check where our happiness is coming from. It's like, before when I had this sense of contentment, thinking I had enough and things were okay as they were, did that bring me a sense of happiness or not? When I was able to see things in a good light, did that bring me happiness and peace of mind or not? And is it that my happiness comes from the outer things? If I have plenty of money or not? having plenty of money the thing that brings me happiness or not? If I think that it was, then what about the people who don't have any money? Then poor things, and they can never not have any happiness. So the main thing is to check up and look at your experience and look at the way that the experiences you have, and then check where it comes from. What are the causes of them? Is it from those outer things or is it from the inner things? So that's that, and to see things in a realistic way, in line with how they actually are. And that's.
예의 강한데 가서 가두인의 심바 시원이기 타라 미다가 상바당 아니 쩐다 연데 니게 차니 따야다 준제랑 신상도 뭐 시인바 디수스.
So the things that Rinpoche previously mentioned, we need to think about those. So the phenomena in the nature of being impermanent, and whatever we meet with, whatever conditions we meet with, they have good aspects and negative aspects, or qualities and faults as well, and how everything arises in dependence upon causes and conditions as well, the objects that we engage with. So and how there's always an opportunity to change any situation. So Rinpoche saying we need to think about those things that he mentioned before. That's the way to go about bringing that. Your question on which one is it, the paper one or the book one? My tiwa did this one. Didn't see them without them on. Reach a point where we... So I'll read it out for everyone. While discussing, we touched upon very briefly that we need to reach a point where we have a choice of not taking any birth. What does a human need to do to achieve that state? And what happens if you decide to not take birth? What about the mind? Can you please repeat the question in English? Sorry. Earlier, while we were discussing, Rinpoche mentioned briefly that we need to reach a point where we have a choice of not taking any birth. So the question is, what does a human need to do to achieve that state? And the second question, what happens if you decide to not take birth? What about the mind? Rinpoche sumanang ne numa de tomat la ngatso di lu di duchegi dunala di subong di duchegi dunel yen ani ngatso di kewa malamba jogore di ludi dawananshin kewa malamba pensin chegore 제자모이 티원이 di 미데서 카레 chegore di ludi kewa malamba kewa malamba la 카레 chegore ani tiwani pa di kewa bed malang ki tobayana deni kari yongire di semla kari chungire kari kawajogire
da dirwa jiwa len di ju kangge wangi lingo resna mi jiwa len di la mi jiwa len thoyagi legi nyuba len thoyagi nyuba ji guro di nyuba di la legi nyuba sigore da nyuba di jibu gi dig mare nyuba thoyala ndesha 되샤기 다 주치고 거래 세상 지원해야지 되샤기 원기 너무 원기 다 하면 되샤기 원기 링거래 되샤디에 투서주디 단생의 투디 거래 세상 지원 때문에 렘고 같이 제발라 지원 렘버 지원 렌제기 주 지원 렌투긴기 내기 뉴버디 세버치 거래 딜라디 레수 주긴기 되샤디 매버치 거래 딜라 디잉을 되자기 자와 나오고 담에 루트를 안생디 매버치고 그래서 다음에 또 싫어도 장고 그랬어 디 저 담부디지 아니 더 단대기 지원인데지 지원 렘버디 빵사비 지라 가르용 그랬어 아니 일을 안 투버다 생을 안 투버다 더 너무 배 신앙도 주고 말 지원인데 람비컬은 아주 너무 배 신앙도 주려 되자지 수나 가래 되자기 되샤기 신앙도 주지지 되샤기 루디기 간대지 낭두에는 전두에는 디낭신지 전에 되샤기 유부지는 줘야래 시당기 유부지는 줘야래 유부 하고 그러
요부 라레 하고
서비스
서번트 라레
시당기 유부지는 줘야래 마제기 유부지는 줘야래 다 너무 자원이 매번 수사디 간다 생라랑 원투 바라다 아니 이지랑 신기 류 참모딜 띵기를 마도 류 라발을 띵기 말했다.
Okay, so the answer to your first question, what does a human need to achieve that state of not taking a birth? So in order to take a human rebirth, we need the potential, this seed, like a seed or potential for taking a human rebirth. And not only that, we need to ripen that seed. Something needs to ripen or activate that seed in order for a human rebirth to be taken. And so the thing that ripens that potential to take a human rebirth is attachment and other afflictions. And so and our attachment and all of our afflictions arise from the main cause, the self-grasping ignorance. And so in order to not take the human rebirth, it comes from a ripening of a seed which is ripened by attachment, which is one of the afflictions, which all stem from self-grasping. Then we need to abandon that root, self-grasping ignorance. And so in order to abandon the self-grasping ignorance, which is the root that brings about the human rebirth, then you need to develop the wisdom realizing selflessness, which is a direct antidote to that self-grasping ignorance. So through meditating on the wisdom realizing selflessness, you're able to abandon that root and thereby abandon taking another rebirth. But with regards to your second question, what happens if you decide not to take that birth? What about the mind? So when we overcome our self-grasping ignorance, when we abandon it completely, then we gain control of our mind. And so when we gain control of the mind, it means to not be under the control of our afflictions, our disturbing emotions. So we still have a mind, but it's no longer the servant of our anger, the servant of our attachment. It's no longer the servant of our afflictions. And so then when we have the mind that's no longer a servant to the afflictions, a mind that when we've gained control of the mind, it's abandoned the afflictions, then we take a subtle body, which is called a body in the nature of mind. Body in the nature of mind, a subtle body.
Mind has the nature of body, also body has the nature of mind.
Chetsan, lu di, sem di, yi di, lu gi rangjing yobe, yana lu di, sem gi rangjing yobe. So it's a body that's in the nature of mind.
So ludi lui rabarwa. Yijirangshi mare lui rabare. The lundi pansane and Dindegi ludi lam guba chasadigan yijirangshi lui tamuch ligre.
So when we abandon this coarse body, this gross level of a body, what we attain is a body in the nature of mind, and it's a very subtle body.
Is it like a rainbow body?
If you say it like that, it's okay. But it's not a rainbow.
Said that we need to practice ignorance and selflessness and all of these things.
Don't practice ignorance. Marek bak gongore be na re mari. Machi wono dikon. Makane marek bak jondo chegore be so so. But no, we need to abandon ignorance.
What I understand, if I understood correctly, does that mean we need to understand the concept of emptiness and then we'll be able to do that easily, and then that can be achieved as in like my human body, like as a human?
Tesan tongni gomne, de gomne di lelawo chaire gomne, ani tongni gombe topki yilu yigi ranjingi lu topki rebe.
Tongni gombe taoji, tongni ngusung tu tong, dine rimbe chesine, jiwa lemu guba cha. Lundinde si lemu guba cha. Lundinde si pegi ludi meba cha digangla, sendi lu tamuji la dingo waro di. Shisa tongni gongji sine lundi pang. Lundi pang be, pang ne ani shini iji rangshin lu tamuji chuyo waro di. Tongni gongba dan zhao yoris.
So there is a relationship with the meditation on emptiness. When we meditate on emptiness again and again until it becomes a perceptual realization of emptiness, then from that perceptual realization of emptiness, from that time onward, we no longer need to take a coarse physical body anymore. And through that meditation, then the mind will still rely on a support, but not a coarse physical body. The support for the mind will then be this very subtle body, which is called a body in the nature of mind. So it is related to the meditation on emptiness.
The last question, okay?
Rinpoche choksikana tirayan shitu de michigi tir.
Okay, should be short.
When I focus on work which I wanted to do also, after some time my frustration started increasing. I want to know your experience over the years, how you developed the focus to do things. Is this the question that already came before, about focus? Yes.
No, it's not.
But it's not the same question, but it's the same situation, right? How to focus. Yeah.
Thank you. Within your spiritual journey to where you are today, are you able to share perhaps something which has been particularly challenging for you, perhaps with your motivation or with one of the teachings or something to do with the monastic life? And perhaps you can share why that was challenging and how you overcame it.
Rinpoche ki nyamlen nangbe kapsu Dela kanyal chik chunsongam kare kapu chunsong ane Rinpoche kulon yapo nyea la kale chumasoe ane domba shune di domba zinya kare sujun zungwala kale chumasoe di sumbo nangne chik yona di kale yin kanyal kare du ane di sepetab Rinpoche kare nampare di tiwa.
Ta kale kashu di tirwa nyomo lak nimbu tinya di nyomo ji yung di gala nyomo ji yung ta linje gi wang ki nyomo ji yung ga so si nyomo ji yung be kado la dila kade jae nimbu tinya di kale kashu diris.
So what I found the most difficult is being able to apply an antidote to an affliction when it's arising. So at the time affliction's arising, to be able to actually apply the antidote. That's what I found the most difficult to do.
다 이내야 녀모발라 니미통 녀모발라 쩐통 니미통 인다나 생기 수수지부기 된다 줘야디 딜라 쩐여봐 디 가수를 상도 꾸버임바 꾸베 상도 임바 아니 자친부기 쇼네 잠불이 지 된다 나가던 냠베 신경이 된다 별지 된다 딘데 상담 미 로지 된다 디수티디 계치문문에레스 지 디수 계치무통 수수 미지 된다디 계치용의 통 가서 그래 통약이 루디 같이 휴지 레외 있는 디지부기 시라핀도 요랬다 디지부 돈에 어다 닌데 제고도 쓰지네 간데 제고마고디 하고용 그랬어 갈리
So the thing that Rinpoche's found most helpful to deal with that is to see the faults, the problems with our with the afflictions, and to reckon and thinking about that. Just thinking about my own happiness is not okay. That there's a fault with a very limited view to just think about my own happiness, and so to expand my mind to be able to think about more people, like all the Tibetans and all of the humans in this world, and all of the sentient beings vast as the limits of space, to be able to think, to open my mind to think about, to not just think about myself, recognizing I'm just only one human being, just thinking about just me, that's not okay. To be able to think about, the sentient beings vast as the limits of space, then just thinking about that alone has been really helpful for me, really beneficial and it helped me to be able to think about what's the appropriate thing to do and not to do. How should I behave and not behave in this situation? So thinking about this alone has been really helpful for me to know what to do and what not to do.
아주 미인상 시제찬에 지발했어. 아주 미인상 시제찬에 아주 상마 지발했어.
가르치. 건들.
말에 그 간데스랑에 삐띠 딘다고 벽에 신다 제마선다. 아주 미려왔어.
We're human, aren't we?
나도 미루와.
Yeah, we're human, aren't we? We're all humans, right?
예. 세상 라고레스.
So we're all the same, right? We're all the same in being humans.
다 이내양 나도 상로동당은 조다인도스.
But we have a way of like change it, and we also have the ability to change our minds, change our way of thinking.
근데 자침부터는 상동디 강라.
Yeah. So, for example, if you want to think in an extensive way,
저. 근데 나도 가봐지해줘. 가봐 띠무다야디.
so like when we're looking at the phone, playing on our phone,
지부도하디 가도.
we're quite happy, aren't we, in the moment that we're playing on the phone?
다 이내양 딜레 ngumambu koro ina dilbe ngukoni chuje mambu tama ina jibu yoro katu jibu yoro.
And actually for as long as we're playing on the phone for ages, like an hour or so could go past, if we're just really absorbed in playing on the phone, then we feel quite happy, don't we?
이내양 간데슬레이 chuje 가시 지무지에 양구 jibu yoro.
Yeah. So even though we're really like we're caught up in it, playing on our phone for a few hours, we're happy, aren't we?
로 이내양 쇼 신다지 상당나 디 뒤에 출라시부 당거도.
But if we think from another perspective, it's actually a really big waste of time, isn't it?
다 베나 나조 카반도스 때 지진에 PhD 제도 그러베 가봤는지.
So just by playing around on our phones for a while, can we get a doctorate? Can we get a PhD?
아니 나조 가봤는지 무지 지진에 나오르기 셀러리 디그리베스.
If we play on the phone all this time, does it give us a monthly salary, a wage?
아니 가봤는지 무지 지진에 수수 나온디 벤주로 여버지 차그리베스.
So by us playing on the phone for a good long while, does it improve our family's resources and well?
가봤는지 무지 지진에 아니 수수 세리 개발소인데 차그리베스. Science, 개발.
So by playing around on the phone for ages, do we become like a science master, a science scholar?
세상 디 된다 자침부 신단 상단의 군뇌제기도.
So if we think from vastly all these different perspectives, we see that actually it harms us a lot, doesn't it?
이 맞아 밀의 진식도.
Not only that, it harms our eyes, doesn't it?
저기 쇼신단 상단은 지물의 차베디 데즈마 까두고도.
So when we're able to think from all these different perspectives, it helps to reduce our attachment to playing on our phone, doesn't it?
자침분이 상단.
Yeah, so it's through thinking vastly, thinking from wide perspectives.
디 mambu를 상 딘다고 mam부당해요.
Yeah, so you can apply that same way of thinking with so many things.
One last question. Sorry. Okay. Short.
Hi. Earlier in this course, somebody else asked a question that I thought was really great, so I wanted to ask it again to you. In Buddhism, we've learned that the self-grasping is the root of suffering. But in other religions, realizing the self is actually the pathway to the highest spiritual achievements and enlightenment. And I'm wondering how should we make sense of these differing approaches where there's other religions where realizing the self and the soul is so important, and in Buddhism it's the complete opposite, and both can reach enlightenment. Like, how should we make sense of that?
Rinpoche kong di Tushita ki kosla negire nima chuvingla ani di kapla danderinya di koi dunya di tsawa di dagzin resha nambe chonang la di sungitwa iniya di choluk shempanang la atman anatman maiba atman di dagye ba sungitu di mase dagye mangdu komne dagye khandi ba yapu shene targa tobiere tamje kemba tobiere labgitwa chetsang nubikinetsa kandida di gelwa dawo tongitu chetsang di dang kon topudu
지당 따주민도 용규어로 따주민도 다 녀만이요. 다 슈리를 따주기 나로라 다 야부지 문진에 타바 투그르세 쿠란수디 간된다고 숨고도디 세우지 야부지 하고 그랬어. 야부지니 시고 그랬어. 아니 다 남배기 송야디 가르쳐 버렸은 단단 가수 되자다 시당디 나 세일루딜 때니 연구도 스티송교 그랬어. 그거도에 로 나 야부 통구도 가서 그래 나라 펜투구도 내 야부 통구도 쓰지네 나 세일루디 실러샤네 차당 연구도 쓰지네 단다기 양용디 실러샤네 송구도 제상 디 상로동석이 심이라고 상동석이 심이라고 슈르베 송야기 타바디 간내라고 송교는 남박이 송야기 타바다 슈르베 송야기 타바니비디 타바스에 지버리디 탈루 타당디 민다오 가르도 디다고 그랬어.
So, since a long time ago, there's been different philosophical positions, different philosophical views. So, what we need to do is to look at what's stated when the non-Buddhist philosophical views say there is a self. How do they describe that self to exist, and how do they describe the way of focusing on that self and this state of So, how they describe that self, and then likewise in Buddhism, how the Buddha explained the self and this selflessness. So, like the Buddha explained it from the point of view of our experience, like when we think of like there's a me who wants to be happy, I want to be happy, I don't want to suffer, I engage in this, I have that, and then in dependence upon that we have these attachment and aversion and things that arise, these different afflictions that arise that come from our sense of I. So the Buddha explained this in the I that exists like that in the way of from our experience, and then the way that self appears to us, and then through that how all our different afflictions arise, and then and then how through how the presentation of selflessness leads to the path of liberation. So we need to look at from the different philosophical views what they mean when because Rinpoche said they have a different basis from the start what they're talking about when they're talking about a self or selfless. What is the self or the selfless that they're talking about, and then how does that meditating on that view lead to the state of liberation? What is the liberation, the state of liberation that is explained by the non-Buddhist philosophers? What do they describe that to be like? And then what is the liberation in the Buddhist presentation? What do they describe that to be like, and how you achieve it? So you need to look at these different philosophical systems and what they mean by it, because they have a different basis of the self that they're talking about in the first place.
슈르베 타바스에디 신칸라고 지라 시기미데 롬반라고 지라 아니 군주기 까나신 조지지네 신칸 다베 신칸지 레웨인 타바투거스기도 사전라고 지 레렌도 팔레지 남바기 타바스에디 팔레 말에 농슈 되어진 게 신칸세 판주지지네 파슈 레지지네 타바투스 시기말 남베 타바투마도 세디 그 당생이 지마디 세마세 디랑기 타바투마도 샤그마도 lumbatina lego mare di mindao testo.
So there's a slight difference in the way they describe it, because the non-Buddhist philosophers, the different traditions, that the way that they explain liberation, they explain it like it's a place that you go to, a place that you arrive at, like you get rid of this land or a place that arose through true origins, and then you go beyond that to this other, like Pure Land, to this other state. So it's a place that you go to. But the Buddhist presentation is not that you have to go somewhere to another place to achieve liberation. It's rather that within your mind, if you overcome the self-grasping, all the obscurations or all the stains of self-grasping, when you completely remove that, then you attain the state of liberation. So it's not a physical place that you go to, but it's a dependence upon removing self-grasping and all the stains of self-grasping that you achieve the state of liberation.
Thank you. Now it's okay?
It's okay if we leave it here now?
No question? Okay, one question. Last question.
Well, can you make one? Like,
Okay, I'll just read.
Okay.
So, how can I be enlightened just for the now and then just be insight later? That's just first question. And
sorry,
second,
enlightened for now and cover where later?
how can I be enlightened just for the now? Just for the now. And just be insight later on.
Inside later on.
After the now, I'll just be insight. For now, I'll be enlightened. Is there a way to go about that?
Nekap I Tamchi Kemba Jubia Yorebe Kandi Jukore Vena Tanda Tamchi Kemba top then day chesu the Layan Newman Layan Gadao.
다 뒤로. 근데 지랑기 세나기 되자기 팀어디. 얘는 되자 친구 주에나 디파 네그 까도이나 디파까 로 싫어 베제 당시 네그 바까와 있나 디 네그기 타버도 탄지 친구스 미다주로.
So if you have to check your mind, and if you're able to, when you see that attachments arising in your mind, for example, if you're able to reduce that attachment or reduce it or prevent it arising, then in that moment, it's all right to give it the name like a liberation or enlightenment.
디 딜런 저기로 생기 랑신 유에서 생 랑신 랑신의 지면 말레바레 생 네그 지생 생기 랑신 주마 마인바디 쿠랑 디강라 가서 리미 샤투나 심바 마추바시시니 생기 랑신 유에서 생 장마인바 디기 랑신디 가주 투두기야 도스 가서 그래 공시신 디강 네투나 네그기 상제스는 저기로다.
So if you're able to connect with the nature of mind being luminous or clear light or pure. So the nature of mind is pure or luminous, and our stains of our afflictions are temporary, adventitious. So if we're able to rest in that nature of mind, its uncontrived natural state of being clear and pure of our afflictions, if you're able to rest in that natural state, the uncontrived state of the mind being clear and free of stains, then that's also all right to call that like a temporary liberation or enlightenment. Or Buddhahood.
지다 하고요. 지출을 따와. 지출을 따와서 상제세 타니 따와요.
So it's also there's this phrase called the view of the perishing, or the view of the transitory collection, like observing the self in one's own continuum as being real I. This view of the transitory collection is also given the name enlightenment or Buddhahood.
So is suffering itself an inevitable, invaluable and latent source of love and compassion that mutates itself through the stories and the lives that we live through time, such that the experience itself becomes the medium of its expression?
Karsa.
Dodina dungyarang the chamze kebe tap dao the tap dao chagirege. Dodina dunyal korang the dila dening aso chamze the chamze kebe tap chagirege.
Re. Shin dunyaji nawa sangdigangla ninji gomba. Rang dunyaji nawa sangdigangla ninjongsi.
So yeah, we can think of it. So yes, when we observe other people's suffering, in dependence on that, we can generate compassion, and when we ourselves are experiencing suffering, we can generate renunciation.
Finish. Thank you, everyone. Now we stop here, okay? Adi shagis. Ani ngo melang chim dengi. Melang chim dengi.
Yeah. So now we're going to finish here, and we're going to recite a little prayer too.
O dagi chini sabe ki wandi tindan ro kongla gambe na chewa ji zen lo santu. Tembe nibo rindo se je jo kanri rayo ko ye shin ga lu penda wa ma len jon ye ni. Debado Dinjuruji, Shanju Sinju Rinpoche Maji, Nyangondo Pewa Sho, Pama Sinji Danji Dinjuruji Nindru Danji, Dagonji Menon Dujuruji, and Minden Yangurbe, O Saji Buji, Shuji Mendo, Thank you.